Chapter 93. Madame Snow and the other two girls were still kneeling on the ground. The three girls had been sobbing since Hu Zhongning came in and left, as if they were the biggest sinners who had hurt Yang Qindong. In the bedroom, Xiao Yin had already helped Yang Qindong take a bath and lie on the bed. Only then did she remember that Madame Snow and the other two girls were still kneeling outside the yard. She asked carefully, "Young master, what should we do with them? It's late at night. They'll get sick if they keep kneeling like this." "Ask them to leave. Forget it. Ask Madame Snow to come in and ask Mu Lily and Wire to leave." Yang Qindong thought for a while and shook his head. If he did not let them in, the three girls would not listen to him and leave. He didn't want to end up causing the three girls to fall sick while he was fine. "Okay," Xiao Yin answered obediently. At this moment, she was not jealous at all. The young master could not be her only young master. She had thought about this for a long time. With one more sister to take care of the young master, perhaps the young master would live a happier life. As long as the young master was happy, she would be happy too. Outside the bedroom, Madame Shui got the message and could enter the bedroom. Mu Lily and Wire both breathed a sigh of relief. They were worried that they couldn't do anything. Now that Madame Shui could go in and help, they could go back to rest. At least, they didn't have to feel so guilty. Madame Snow followed Xiao Yin into the bedroom with a worried look. She saw Yang Qindong lying on the bed. At that moment, she couldn't stop her tears from flowing out. With a plop, she knelt down and said, "Dong Shui, it's all our fault for implicating you. We've already made a decision. Tomorrow morning, we'll enter the city and ask for forgiveness from Shisheng." "Nonsense." Yang Qindong, who was going to rest, immediately opened his eyes. His expression suddenly became very serious. "Remember, your lives belong to the young master. Without the order of the young master, no one can make decisions without my permission. As for Shisheng, he can't even protect himself. He won't make trouble for you." Seeing Yang Qindong's serious look, Madame Snow trembled with fear. She knelt on the ground and did not dare to make a sound. Xiao Yin came forward, helped her up, and then whispered something in her ear. Madame Snow's face changed again and again. Finally, she looked at Yang Qindong with confusion. Her eyes were full of disbelief. Yang Qindong naturally knew what this gaze meant. At that moment, he did not hold back and directly lifted the blanket, revealing his strong and uninjured chest. He said, Look, Einer did not lie to you. I am indeed not injured." "Ah." Madame Snow did the same thing as Xiao Yin. She covered her mouth with her hand. Her face was full of disbelief. After seeing so much blood in the side hall, she thought that Dong Shui was going to die. Who would have thought that he would be fine? How did he do that? "All of you come over here. This young master will tell you slowly." Madame Snow's surprised face was so cute. Yang Qindong's heart skipped a beat. His body reacted unconsciously. He waved his hand and asked Xiao Yin and Madame Snow to come to his bedside. The two women did not suspect anything and hurriedly came to the side of the bed. Suddenly, a pair of big hands reached over and forcefully pulled the two women into the bed. Suddenly, a masculine man's breath rushed into the two women's nostrils. Ah! At this moment, they realized what was going on. They instinctively wanted to struggle, but when they remembered that the person hugging them was Yang Qindong, the two women suddenly blushed. They just lowered their heads and didn't resist at all. "Not bad. It's easier to talk like this." "Huh?" Yang Qindong laughed heartily. Although he was not ready to do anything, especially with two women at the same time, it was a very happy thing to have beautiful women in his arms. The two women were very cooperative. They leaned on Yang Qindong's broad shoulders. Their faces were full of shyness and happiness. "Come on, sing a song for the young master. Put me to sleep." Feeling that his body was about to react unnaturally, Yang Qindong suppressed his thoughts and said to Madame Snow, "Okay." Madame Snow was very obedient. She immediately sang the song that she had just learned, by Suzhen at the foot of Mount Qingcheng. "Don't sing a new song. Sing an old song for the young master." Yang Qindong was used to listening to the songs of the later generations. He did not know much about the songs of the present, so he wanted to take this opportunity to learn more about them. The next moment, Madame Shui began to play an old tune. The lingering melody was like a lullaby. Before long, Yang Chendong began to snore. He was really tired. There were too many things he had to do and think about in the past few days. He had to bear all the pressure by himself. Yang Chendong had actually fallen asleep, causing Qiao Yin and Madame Snow to involuntarily smile. Next, the two women made the same shameful action, which was to take off their coats, leaving only their undergarments. They leaned against Yang Chendong and snuggled up to each other. Not long after, they fell asleep. The guards outside the bedroom, Beta Persei and Yang Si, had been replaced by Yang Wu and Yang Lu. In the dark, Dao Xiao and a team of 10 guards were secretly watching everything to prevent anyone from getting close to the small courtyard. If anyone dared to do so, Jiu Wu, with a silencer and a weapon, would show him the fragility of life. The sky slowly brightened. Hu Zhongning, who could not wait any longer, led a team of 100 brocade guards to escort Shi Sheng and more than 20 men to the capital. As soon as the city gate opened, they entered the city and went straight to the inner city. In the imperial palace, there was no news from the court. The civil and military officials were still gathered in the court as usual, kneeling to the emperor and discussing the affairs of the world. Emperor Zhu Qizhen, who did not seem to have enough sleep, yawned from time to time, and then listlessly listened to the officials' reports. The emperor was diligent in his work. Since ancient times, this had become a custom. Almost all the leaders had to do this. Otherwise, they would not be able to hold power. As such, very few emperors would sleep in. In comparison, Yang Chendong was much more fortunate. At this moment, he was slowly waking up. According to his usual routine, it should be time for him to get up and go for a morning run. However, instead of a morning run, he was greeted with an erection. This was something that all men in their prime would encounter. His body was the first to react. Yang Chendong, who was hugging two women, wanted to get up, but it was very inappropriate. Was he supposed to set up a tent in front of the two women? How embarrassing would that be? In addition, he had to tell others that he was injured. If he could get up and continue to run, it would be inexcusable. Let's go back to sleep. Yang Chendong tried to convince himself. He ignored the warning of his biological clock and wanted to continue sleeping. But at this moment, Qiao Yin's body moved slightly on his left, and her breathing seemed to become heavier. For a long time, Qiao Yin had a very regular pattern of waking up and sleeping. For example, at this time, she would usually get up to prepare to serve the young master. Although she didn't need to make breakfast, she came to the young master's room to tidy it up and fold the blankets. So the moment Yang Chendong woke up, she also woke up. Her hand inadvertently swept over Yang Chendong's body and touched that towering pillar. In that instant, Qiao Yin completely woke up. Her face flushed red as she recalled where she was staying at this moment. She thought about how the young master was lying next to her and seemed to have a reaction. What should she do? Should she ignore it and continue to pretend to sleep, or should she help the young master? She had heard the old women in the manor say that once a man had that intention, it would be very uncomfortable if it wasn't resolved. Qiao Yin definitely didn't want Yang Chendong to feel uncomfortable. So what should she do? What should she do? Her heart thumped wildly. In just a few breaths, Qiao Yin made a decision. She took a deep breath and mustered up her courage. Her small hand groped toward Yang Chendong's crotch. Knowing that Qiao Yin had woken up, Yang Chendong felt very awkward. Just as he was thinking about how to return to normal, a small hand suddenly touched him. In that instant, his body couldn't help but tremble. The feeling made him feel very comfortable, but also very nervous. It was really indescribable with words. "Young master, let Ina serve you." Suddenly, he heard the soft sound of drizzling rain. Before he could react, Qiao Yin had already dove into the blankets and swam towards that place. No, Yang Chendong instinctively wanted to stop her. It was this shout that woke Madame Shui on the other side. Due to the nature of Madame Shui's work, she didn't wake up very regularly. In addition, Yang Chendong lying next to her gave her a great sense of security, so she fell into a deep sleep. If it wasn't for Qiao Yin's shout, she probably wouldn't have woken up. After waking up, Madame Shui forgot that she was only wearing a tutu. On the contrary, she only remembered that the young master seemed to be injured. "Is he feeling unwell?" she asked anxiously. When Yang Chendong saw that Madame Snow had woken up, he felt a little awkward. Just as he was about to say something, Xiao Yin moved. In that instant, he felt a warm sensation spread throughout his body. He couldn't help but shiver slightly. Along with the shiver, he let out an "oh" sound from his mouth. I'm so scared of crabs. I'll omit 100,000 words here. Chapter 94. While Yang Chendong was still blissfully confused, the court, which was originally calm, was in an uproar because of Hu Zhongning's sudden arrival. Your Majesty, this is the entire story of what happened last night. Hu Zhongning knelt on the ground and explained in detail what he saw and heard. Then he lowered his head deeply, as if he was waiting for the emperor's judgment. After Hu Zhongning told the story of what happened in Yangjiao village, the court officials suddenly exploded. Without the emperor's order, and without the slightest evidence, a Qianhu of the embroidered uniform guard dared to kill a fifth-rank official who had just made a great contribution. This was simply lawlessness. Not to mention, according to Hu Zhongning's explanation, a lot of potatoes were also wasted because of this. Overnight, Lord Hu brought people to dig up the trampled land, and found that the potatoes in the field were greatly damaged. Many of them were already deformed. Of course, they didn't know that all of this was arranged by Yang Chendong in advance. Those potatoes were also cleaned up in advance. They didn't know that all of this was done by Yang Chendong. But they knew that the loss of potatoes was a loss to the court, the country, the emperor and the court officials. Immediately, as the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zuo was the first to jump out. Originally, he was worried that there weren't enough potatoes. Because of this, he wanted to discuss with Yang Chendong and ask him to contribute more potatoes from his private fields. But now, not only did the country's potatoes suffer from the loss of production, Yang Chendong was also injured. If he couldn't punish Xixing now, how could he negotiate with him? If he didn't punish the murderer, how could Yang Chendong be satisfied? If it were him, how could he be satisfied? Your Majesty. With a plop, he knelt on the ground. Xixing has no respect for your Majesty, no respect for the law of the country, and did things based on his mood. He actually wanted to kill a court official. If this matter isn't severely punished, I'm afraid that the hearts of all the court officials will be cold. With Wang Zuo taking the lead, the Minister of Rights, Hu Ming, also knelt on the ground. For the sake of his son's future, he had to ruthlessly deal with Xixing this time. Otherwise, if he had already offended Xixing's son, wouldn't he be punished afterwards? Your Majesty, this subject agrees with Lord Wang's request to severely punish the murderer Xixing. This subject agrees. Du King, the representative of the military, Zhang Fu, who had always been a wooden block in the imperial court, was also kneeling on the ground, his face full of resentment. Last year, his family's fertile land had been seized by the two brothers, Xi Ning and Xixing, causing his reputation to hit rock bottom. After that, he had been depressed and was prepared to spend the rest of his life as a loser. And now the opportunity to counterattack had come. The two civil officials had taken the initiative to jump out. How could he be polite? He immediately expressed his thoughts. After the three of them, the other officials and generals also got down on their knees one by one, all of them wearing indignant expressions as they cursed the lawless and overjoyed man. Ing Zong, who was sitting on the dragon throne, had an ugly expression on his face. He had long regarded the potato as a great auspicious item, and announced it to the world. It was equivalent to an imperial item. But Xixing actually dared to bring people to attack and trample on the auspicious item. This was simply ignoring the existence of imperial power. Even if you have enmity with Yang Chendong and want to deal with him, you can find a safe place to do it. Why do you have to do it on the auspicious item's crops? Isn't this the same as the god of longevity hanging himself? Are you tired of living? At this moment, Ing Zong really wanted to order Xixing to be killed as a warning to others. But at this time Wang Zhen, who was standing on the side, opened his mouth. Your Majesty, this matter is really strange. Why did Lord Shi kill Yang Shima? Why did he choose to do it on the auspicious items crops? All of this needs to be investigated. In this old servant's humble opinion, we should first clarify the whole story before making a decision. Originally, Wang Zhen was very angry after hearing Hu Zhangning's words. He also wanted to kill Hu Zhangning to relieve the hatred in his heart. After all, he and Yang Qindong already had a common interest. Just yesterday, Mao Mu, the court eunuch of the ceremony directorate, gave him a good item called diapers. With it, he really didn't need to worry about embarrassing himself on the spot because of his body. Wang Zhen also knew that these things came from Yang Qindong's hands and were brought to the palace by Mao Mu to sell. The main consumer group was the court eunuchs. Moreover, a single diaper was not cheap and actually cost 2 taels of silver. Fortunately, he could get 10% of the benefits from these 2 taels of silver. Many little drops make an ocean. Naturally, it was a profitable way to make money. With a common interest, Xixing still wanted to harm Yang Qindong and even wanted to kill him. This was an unforgivable matter. But no matter what, this person was Xining's younger brother and his only brother. Just based on this point, he had to stand up and speak up. The reason why Wang Zhen could have such power, other than Zhu Qizhen's great trust in him, was that he had the support of most of the court eunuchs. It was precisely because he had such confidence that he could be so unscrupulous and smooth when doing things. Xining was one of the more powerful ones among those who supported him. If he couldn't speak up for Xisheng in this matter, then he would naturally offend him and his leadership position would be shaken. Chapter 95. Since he was prepared to back down, Yang Qindong had to put on a show of respect. What was the point of meeting Jining? To make him lower his head in front of him? The 6th young master would never do such a thankless task. In the side hall, Jining sat on the left while Mao Mu sat on the right. Both of them were looking straight ahead. Gentlemen, the 6th young master has a message for eunuch Mao. Please enter his bedroom. Lord Ji, if you have something to do, you can go ahead. Tiger's mane entered the hall and clasped his hands. Jining stood up with a satisfied look on his face, as though he had expected this to happen. Good. Then I'll take my leave first. Please send my regards to the 6th young master. Jining's task was to mediate between the two of them. In order to achieve his goal, he had to lower his head when necessary. Fortunately, Yang Qindong was tactful. If he didn't want to see Jining, he wouldn't have to see Jining lowering his head. Jining had to accept this favor. Good. Lord Ji, I'll definitely pass on your message to my young master. Tiger's mane understood Yang Qindong's intentions and was naturally very polite to Jining. Ha ha ha. Jining laughed loudly and turned to leave, his face full of self-satisfaction. Mao Mu was left behind. He asked Tiger's mane anxiously, did something happen to the 6th young master? Please follow me, eunuch Mao. You'll know when you see him. Tiger's mane knew that Mao Mu had already sided with his young master. But even so, unless the young master ordered him to do so, he wouldn't say a word. The bedroom was still filled with fragrance. Naturally, it was the fragrance left behind by Qiao Yin and Madame Snow. As soon as Mao Mu entered the bedroom, he immediately sensed the scent. He couldn't help but be delighted. This at least proved that the 6th young master's injuries weren't serious. Now he could be at ease. He had just expressed his loyalty yesterday. If something happened to the 6th young master today, he really didn't know what to do. You're here. Take a seat. Yang Qindong leaned against the headboard and looked at eunuch Mao Mu with a normal expression. 6th young master, are you all right? After this old servant found out about it, I was so anxious that I couldn't even eat. All right, tell me what eunuch Wang thinks. When Yang Qindong saw that Mao Mu was about to use his flattery, he had no choice but to interrupt him and get straight to the point. Knowing that the 6th young master didn't like flattery, Mao Mu tactfully stopped and got down to business. Eunuch Wang said that he hopes that the 6th young master will be magnanimous and spare Xixing for the sake of him, and eunuch Xining. As for the conditions, he allows this old servant to be promoted to eunuch penning of the ceremony directorate. Although I'm ranked last, it's still a big step up. At the same time, he promises that Xixing won't cause trouble for the 6th young master. Also, when you do things in the capital in the future, the Eastern Faction Guards and the Brocade Guards will give you face and won't cause trouble for you. After saying these words, Mao Mu lowered his head a lot. He received the most from this so-called exchange, so he didn't have to say anything more. Mao Mu's promotion from attendant to penning of the ceremony directorate was a step that many people wouldn't be able to achieve in their lifetime without enough merit or ability. This was equivalent to a small eunuch becoming the head of eunuchs. And these were the conditions that Wang Zhen had to pay. As for the Eastern faction guards and the brocade guards not causing trouble for him, it was better to say that they were giving him face than saying that they were threatening him. The meaning was very obvious. If Yang Qindong didn't agree and insisted on killing Xixing, then these two departments would keep an eye on the Yang family manor. If there was even the slightest movement, the Yang family would be in big trouble. After understanding the crux of the matter, Yang Qindong's expression turned cold. This Wang Zhen was really an ingrate that couldn't be fed. Fortunately, he had less than a year to live. Otherwise, with the sixth young master's temperament, he would probably send Tiger's Mane and the others to take his life tonight. Don't bother with a person who's about to die. Let people off when possible. Take a step back and you'll see the world. All kinds of advice from saints flowed into Yang Qindong's mind, making him finally make up his mind to take a step back. As for what would happen next, he would urge Gao Xiong and the others to take action on Ryukyu Island. He had to quickly seize more territory. Only when he was strong would others not dare to bully him and ignore him. Many thoughts flashed through his mind. When he finally returned to reality, Yang Qindong smiled and patted Mao Mu on the shoulder. Good. This young master used a knife wound in exchange for your promotion. No matter how I look at it, it's a good deal. How about this? When you go back, tell Eunuch Wang that this matter is over. Sixth young master. At this moment, Mao Mu was so touched that his nose turned sour. He thought that in the face of a powerful group of eunuchs, Yang Qindong would give in, but he didn't expect him to be so straightforward. If that was the case, it seemed that the biggest beneficiary was himself. He'd only been with him for 2 days, and he'd been promoted twice. The path he'd chosen was indeed correct. Okay. I don't like to express my position through words. I'd rather see everything put into action. How is it? How are diapers selling in the palace? Yang Qindong didn't bring up the previous matter and spoke in a casual manner. It's selling very well. After all, it's like these things are tailor-made for us eunuchs. Now all the eunuchs with some status come to me to get the goods. Because of this, some people have bad ideas. But this time, I've been promoted twice, and I have Eunuch Wang behind me. Others don't dare to do anything to me. When talking about the situation in the palace, Mao Mu's tone became much more excited. He thought of yesterday afternoon, when several eunuchs who used to ignore him took the initiative to greet him, and called him Eunuch Mao. He felt a burst of elation. Good, very good. Continue doing what you're doing. For those eunuchs who have requests but don't have money, you can have them use other things in exchange. For example, some information they've heard. Then, sort out what you think is useful and send it to this young master. Do you understand? Yang Qindong said encouragingly. Mao Mu was a chess piece he'd buried in the palace, and on the surface. At the very least, Wang Zhen knew that the two of them had a deep relationship. But this was just a smokescreen. In reality, he wanted information from the palace, and he wanted to use Mao Mu as the center to quickly develop his own power. In the eyes of the sixth young master, the intelligence war wasn't just about information from the capital. He had to know all the information from the officials and the palace. Only then could he make the most accurate decisions. This servant understands. Mao Mu patted his chest and promised, and then he added, I also know a few things about Brother Xining's illegal activities. As long as the sixth young master needs it, I can send someone to sort it out at any time. There's no need. Remember, you're only looking for information. Before you've stabilized your position, don't think about dealing with anyone. On the contrary, you have to maintain good relations with everyone. Do you understand? Yang Qindong shook his head. Xining's fate had already been explained in history. As long as nothing unexpected happened, someone else would deal with him. There was no need for him to do anything. Although Mao Mu didn't understand why Yang Qindong had such a good temper. Since his master had said this, as a servant, he had to obey, so he immediately agreed. Just as the officials had expected, After Wang Zhen took over the Yang clan, he quickly sent someone to reach an agreement with Yang Qindong. No one knew what sort of promise had been made, but in any case Yang Qindong, the victim, was no longer pursuing the matter. As a result, some of the officials who wanted to take advantage of the situation had no chance. In the palace, Wang Zhen did not go back on his word and promoted Mao Mu to head eunuch of the ceremony directorate. Henceforth, this person would be one of the leading eunuchs in the organization. The gloomy Xining walked into Wang Zhen's room. Once there was no one else present, he immediately got down on his knees. My thanks to Eunuch Wang for saving my brother. If you have any orders, Xining will do his best to repay them. Haha, Eunuch Xi, what are you doing? Get up, get up. Wang Zhen helped Xining up from the ground with a smile. We all serve His Majesty, so isn't it only right for us to help each other? As for that young Shima, he magnanimously let this matter pass. You two brothers should know how to be grateful. At least for the time being, don't think about provoking him, understand? Since he had promised not to harass Yang Qindong, Wang Zhen had to do it. At least for the time being, he still had to do it. This was also related to his own interests. Yes, since Eunuch Wang has spoken, I will naturally obey. Then, do you need this eunuch to personally go to the Yang clan and meet the multi-talented Dong Shuai? Even though Xining was smiling, his face still gave people a gloomy feeling. Perhaps only when he was on duty in front of His Majesty would his smile become truly brilliant. That's not necessary. This eunuch asked Xining to go there before, which is already giving him enough face. There's no need for Eunuch Xi to make a trip for such a small matter. Wang Zhen shook his head. Regarding Yang Qindong, his feelings were somewhat complicated. No matter what, this person was the descendant of the three Yang Qindong. Logically speaking, this person should be his enemy. But for the sake of benefits, they were bound together. Within a limited range, he would help as much as he could. But once things got troublesome, he would decisively give up on Yang Qindong. Of course, he didn't need such a chess piece in his eyes. He also didn't want more people to come into contact with him. It was enough to have Mao Mu as a bridge. As for Xining, this person was extremely smart. If he was able to establish a connection with Wang Zhen, who knew how much benefits he would get. Xining said this just to express his attitude. He didn't want to make things too difficult for Wang Zhen. Since he didn't need to make an appearance, who would be willing to make an apology? He immediately promised that he wouldn't find Yang Qindong to express his gratitude, nor would he cause trouble for him. In the future, everyone would mind their own business. Then he asked about his younger brother Xisheng. This was the main reason why he came. He asked when his younger brother would be released. Chapter 96. After a while. The Imperial Prison is our territory anyway. Your brother won't suffer there. If you want, you can go see him at any time. As for releasing him, I'll see when the Emperor is in a good mood. I'll plead for mercy for you. Wang Zhen thought about it, but he still didn't want to release Xisheng. Firstly, he wanted to give the officials an explanation. He couldn't just release Xisheng right after he started yelling about fighting and killing. That would be too obvious of favoritism. Secondly, he wanted to give the other eunuchs a warning. If they dared to make a move without permission, they had to be prepared to go to the imperial prison. All right, we'll listen to Eunuch Wang. Xining also knew that it would be inappropriate to release Xisheng now. He thought about how the officials were living a life worse than death in the imperial prison. However, his younger brother was there, which was equivalent to recuperating. There was nothing to worry about. Things seemed to have calmed down. However, through this incident, Yang Qindong saw some people's hearts. For example, his brother's behavior disappointed the sixth young master. Eldest brother, second brother and third brother didn't come. Only fourth brother and fifth brother came to see him. Fifth brother came alone. After seeing that Yang Qindong was fine, he left with peace of mind. Not only did fourth brother come, but he also brought Duke of Wei Suqing's eldest son, Su Qingzong. Yang Qindong naturally knew why his three brothers didn't come. First, it was because Yang Qindong had offended Xisheng and Xining. They were afraid of being implicated, so they didn't dare to come. Fifth brother was more honest and didn't think too much. As for fourth brother, he obviously came for something. In the side hall, Yang Chendong walked out with Xiao Yin and Lady Snow on his left and right. Immediately, Yang and young Master Su Qingzong looked at him enviously, as if he was a pig. Thank you for your trouble, fourth brother and young Master Su. Yang Chendong sat down and cupped his hands, looking as if he still couldn't walk properly. When it came to serious matters, Yang seemed to be a lot more agitated. Sixth brother, you've suffered a lot this time. That Xing is really too much of a bully. Do you want me to find a few people to secretly beat him up? Oh. Fourth brother has this kind of ability. Yang Chendong knew that Yang Chendong was putting on an act in front of him, but he still pretended to be surprised, as if he would agree at any time. Seeing that Yang Chendong was about to get serious, Yang Chendong's complexion immediately changed. He changed his tone and said, "Revenge is a dish best served cold. Let's wait for a while. When the limelight is over, it won't be too late to deal with him." Yang Chendong smiled and shook his head. His fourth brother was already in his 30s, but sometimes he behaved like a child. Yang Chendong naturally wouldn't mind. Instead, he looked at Su Qingzong and cupped his fists. "Brother Su, I'm really sorry to trouble you to come here." Sixth young master, please don't say that. In fact, this young master has come here to ask for a favor. Su Qingzong's expression was somewhat conflicted, as if he had something to ask but didn't know how to say it. Oh. Brother Su, feel free to speak your mind. There are no outsiders here. Yang Chendong didn't even look at Xiao Yin and Madame Shui. They were going to be his women, so of course they weren't outsiders. Xiao Yin and Madame Snow were very excited by Yang Chendong's actions. Their gazes on Yang Chendong became much gentler. Originally, Su Qingzong couldn't say some things in front of the two women. However, since Yang Chendong said so, unless he gave up on his purpose, he had to say it. Well, since the sixth young master doesn't treat me as an outsider, then I'll say it. Actually, in addition to visiting the sixth young master, I have another thing that Madame Xiang of the Nine Arts Workshop asked me to do. As he spoke, he paid attention to Yang Chendong's reaction. He didn't seem surprised at all. However, Madame Shui, who was standing next to him, seemed a little unnatural. Seeing that Yang Chendong didn't ask or interrupt him, Su Qingzong simply gritted his teeth and told him about Madame Shui's request. Seeing that the 100 Flowers Hall is about to close, Madame Xiang wants to learn some songs from the sixth young master, so that more people can hear the sounds of nature. Yes, we've been listening to new songs recently. If we don't hear it, we'll feel uncomfortable. Young Master Su's idea is also our idea. Yang saw Su Qingzong give him a look and immediately spoke up to help him. One was the eldest son of Duke Wei, and the other was Yang Chendong's fourth brother. It was obvious that Madame Xiang had put in a lot of effort, and was determined to get these two people to intercede. Unfortunately, Madame Xiang didn't know Yang Chendong, nor did she know his ambition. If Madame Xiang was just an ordinary entertainer, perhaps Yang Chendong would have helped her. He would have taught her 2 or 3 songs casually, which would have saved everyone's face. But who was Madame Xiang? She was a talent. Since she was a talent and Yang Chendong had met her, there was no reason for him to let her go. Madame Shui was already in his hands and on his bed. Where was Madame Xiang? Su Qingzong and Yang Chendong, who had been waiting for a reply, felt their hearts skip a beat. They thought that they would definitely get what they wanted, but something went wrong. Was Yang Chendong really not willing to give them face? I'm sorry, Brother Su, fourth brother. It's not that I don't want to give you face, but I think too highly of Madame Xiang. I think she just wants to be an entertainer and stay in the small 9 Arts Workshop. She won't be able to achieve anything in her life. It's better for her to come here. I have a big platform here, and I'm sure she'll have room to express herself. Then, she can learn more new songs. Yang Chendong's words were very clear. It was not that he didn't want to give them face, but he wanted to take Madame Xiang in, since he wanted to keep her for his own use. Why would he teach her a new song, and let her have more strength to stand on her own? Hearing such a reason and answer, the two people didn't know what to say for a while. If it had been any other way to refuse, the two of them would have been angry. However, Yang Chendong had said that everything was for his own benefit, and that he wanted to take Madame Xiang in. What else could they say? Criticize him for being overbearing? No matter what era it was, there was one principle that didn't change. Those who were capable would rise, and those who were mediocre would fall. In terms of new songs, Yang Chendong's performance was definitely the best. He naturally had a certain amount of authority in this area, so it was hard for others to refute his words. That. Sixth young master. What do you mean by a big platform? Even though Su Qingzong understood what he meant, he still didn't want to give up. The immortal abode. The immortal abode that even His Majesty knows of is huge, and has a good environment. It's not something a small 9 arts workshop can compare to. When the time comes, the number of customers there will be many times greater than the current 9 arts workshop. Singing new songs there will be more influence, and naturally, you'll be able to earn even more money. Yang Chendong's answer could be said to be powerful and resonant, thus making Su Qingzong and Yang Yang shut their mouths. The immortal abode was still under renovation, and in order to maintain a sense of mystery, it didn't allow outsiders to casually investigate. However, its reputation had long since spread far and wide. Apart from the fact that His Majesty knew of it and had promised to personally attend the opening ceremony, there was another important reason for its influence. It was said that a total of 300,000 taels of silver had been invested. 300,000 taels. 1 tael of silver could be exchanged for 1,000 copper coins, and 1 copper coin could buy 2 small steamed buns. If that was the case, 1 tael of silver was equivalent to 1,000 yuan in the modern era. 300,000 taels of silver was equivalent to 300 million yuan in the modern era. It was just a restaurant, yet such a huge investment had been made. It was no wonder that everyone was so curious about it. As a result, the restaurant industry in the capital had already been dealt a heavy blow before it even opened. Some restaurant owners were already considering selling their businesses. They were worried that once the immortal abode opened, everyone would go there to spend money. What would they do then? A restaurant that hadn't even opened, yet was already enough to make everyone in the same industry feel insecure, to say nothing of the common folk. They were all waiting with bated breath, wondering what the immortal abode would be like after investing so much money in it. Would it really become the abode of a deity? Yang Chendong was using the immortal abode as a platform, so a small 9 arts workshop naturally couldn't compare to it. Su Qingzong, who was still a little unconvinced, couldn't say anything more. After a while, the two of them dejectedly left. Yang Chendong and the other 2 remained in the side hall. Young master, have you really taken a liking to Lady Xiang? Out of curiosity or jealousy? Madame Shui asked the question out of jealousy. Haha, her dancing isn't bad. Yang Chendong didn't answer the question. Then, when he saw that Madame Snow and Xiaoyin didn't seem to care, he put on a straight face and said, "Let me tell you, I have a lot of property, and there are many opportunities for you to show off. Let alone the 3 of you. Even if a dozen talents like you came, the young master would still be able to handle them all. So don't even think about fighting amongst yourselves. If Lady Xiang doesn't come, then it's fine. But if she does, then we'll be good sisters. If I find out who played a role in this, I won't punish her. I'll just let her leave the Yang clan." Yang Chendong said these words very seriously and solemnly. It seemed that he rarely saw Yang Chendong like this. For a moment, Xiao Yin and Lady Shui's faces changed. Because they once had him, they were even more afraid of losing him now. They immediately knelt on the ground. "Young master, we're just asking. We don't have that kind of thought. Come on, get up." When the 2 women knelt, Yang Chendong's heart ached. He quickly reached out to help them up and held them in his arms. "I'll set a rule. Don't kneel so often in the future. What if you hurt your knees? The young master will feel sorry for you. Well, now let this young master see if you're really hurt. Let's go to the bedroom." Since the scene in the morning, the relationship between Yang Chendong and the 2 women had undergone a qualitative change. Although the last step hadn't been taken yet, it was only a matter of time. Yang Chendong, who already knew what was going on, decided to do both of them today. Now was the best time. Ah! How could the 2 women not know what the young master was going to do? For a moment, their faces flushed red. But how could they be a match for Yang Chendong, who was so powerful? Moreover, they had been looking forward to it. Now that they were finally going to get what they wanted, they were overjoyed. How could they back down? Not long after, the three of them entered the bedroom, and the sounds of spring filled the air. 100,000 words omitted here. Chapter 97. Jiu Arts Workshop. After Su Qingzong and Yang Yang left the Yang family manor, they came to this place and saw Cui Nar and Dong Hanxiang, who were waiting for news. In Lady Xiang's boudoir, the two of them told the story of Yang Qindong's request. Originally, it was a man's pride to be able to come to Miss Yang's room. But today, they felt as if their butts were on fire. They left after telling her everything. They didn't want to stay a moment longer. Cui Nar, Miss Yang, and her maid, Chun Tao, were left looking at each other. Cui Nar couldn't help but say, "Men are all bad. Dong Shui has already taken Miss Shui. Does he want to take our Xiang? Who does he think he is?" It was no wonder that Cui Nar was so angry. Miss Xiang was her money tree. Although Jiu Arts Workshop was not under her name, she was just a manager. In the words of the later generations, she was a senior manager. But here her words carried a lot of weight. Once Miss Xiang left, the business of Jiu Arts Workshop would be greatly affected. At that time, her income would be reduced by more than half. How could she live then? Cui Nar's tone was resolute. Miss Xiang heard it, but she acted as if she didn't hear it. Instead, she said something that surprised everyone. "Sister, you can follow Dong Shui like Mu Lily. When the time comes, as long as I make this request, I'm sure he will agree." What? Cui Nar was shocked. She stared at Miss Shui as if she didn't know her. You really want to go to Dong Shui? He is indeed talented, but he already has a powerful person like Miss Shui. If you go there, what status will you have? Will you be a concubine? Sister, I don't understand what you're saying. With our background, who can we be the first wife if we were to be with him? If we're lucky, we'll be pampered for a few more years. If we're unlucky, we'll be treated like a maid in the end. Even if Madame Shui is one step ahead of us, so what? She can't become a wife either. Even if she can become a concubine, it depends on Dong Shui's mood. As she spoke, Lady Xiang shook her head with a sad expression. This was the tragedy of the hierarchy. As a concubine, she seemed to be glorious in front of others, but in reality, she was just a lowly person. She was even worse than an ordinary person. With this kind of status, which good family would want them? Even if she did meet one and married him, as she aged, the number of people who had a good ending could be counted on one's fingers. Cui Nar was speechless for a while after being exposed by Madame Xiang. She sat there for a long time without saying anything. Sister, just promise Xiang, or that you'll go to the East Marshal's place with her. Otherwise, if something like what happened in 100 Flowers Hall happened in our 9 Arts Workshop, do you think someone as daring as Dong Shui would appear? For the sake of performing artists like us, you're willing to offend the nobles and even take a stab. What you need to do is to rise above others, Yang Qindong replied firmly. Then he looked at Tiger's Mane, who was standing in the hall. Do you know what to do? Also, after you take their slave contracts, find Mao Mu and tell him that you will raise their registration. Yes. Tiger's Mane cupped his fists and agreed. Then he stepped back. Madame Xiang and Chun Tao were left behind. They looked at Yang Qindong, who had just sat down in surprise. What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? Yang Qindong was very puzzled. He thought that there was something on his face, so he touched it with his hand, but found nothing. Dong Shui? What did you just say? You said that you will raise our registration? Madame Shui looked at him in disbelief. She was afraid that she had misheard him. That's right. What's wrong? Didn't my fourth brother tell you? Alas, it's my fault. I didn't tell you clearly. Now, I won't hide it from you. Madame Shui and the other two have been raised and have become good people. Yang Qindong thought about it. It seemed that he really didn't mention it to his fourth brother. He couldn't help but smile and didn't take it seriously. However, this was not a big deal in Yang Qindong's eyes. In Madame Xiang's eyes, it was completely different. If a lowly person wanted to raise their status, it was not only possible to spend a lot of money, but also needed the approval of the higher-ups. It even needed someone from the palace to do it. These conditions were far beyond their ability, and they didn't dare to think about it. However, all of this seemed to be a piece of cake for Yang Qindong. He just needed to say a few words, and someone would do it for him. This was the power of authority. It was far from something that ordinary people like them could imagine. After receiving Yang Qindong's affirmation, Madame Xiang immediately burst into tears of joy. Chun Tao, the maid beside her, also couldn't stop crying. Yang Qindong, on the other hand, hated seeing women cry the most. He couldn't quite accept it, so he found an excuse to get them to bring Cui Na over as well, and let Yang Si and Yang Wu follow them to do their errands. Tiger's Mane was very efficient. They received the order in the morning, and everything was done in the evening. They brought 3 new contracts with the official seal of the Ming Dynasty. That was to say, from this moment on, Madame Xiang and the other 2 were free. They were no longer lowly people who were looked down upon by others. They were dignified girls from good families. The 3 of them hugged each other and cried for a long time. In the inner courtyard, Yang Qindong called Xiaoyin, Madame Shui, and Madame Xiang and told them the rules of the Yang family in front of them. Regardless of one's background, contribution and hard work were all important. As long as one was willing to put in the effort, they would be richly rewarded. On the other hand, if one wanted to use their status to bully others, then they should prepare to leave the Yang family. None of the 7 girls complained about this, and they all expressed that they would do their best. With the addition of Madame Shui and Madame Xiang, Yang Qindong's training program sped up, and everything proceeded smoothly. At this time, the interior of the immortal abode was in the final stages of its renovation, and it would be ready to open for business in half a month. The goods produced in Crimson City were transported by sea to Tientsin, where they would be transported to the capital. With Wang Zhen's help, the journey to the capital was smooth and unimpeded. A large number of goods were transported to the capital's immortal abode, and the 100 men and women who had been trained began to take up their posts. They used what they had learned to manage everything in an orderly fashion. Worth mentioning were the 2 leaders, Mu Lili and Cui Na. Their methods of management were far superior to Yang Qindong's. The 100 men were divided into 2 groups, each led by one of them. For a moment, there seemed to be competition between them, which greatly increased the efficiency of the work. They had originally thought that they would need another 7 or 8 days to sort everything out, but thanks to the efforts of the 2 former procuress sisters, they could open for business ahead of time. An auspicious date was chosen, and the opening was set for the 6th day of the 10th month. Yang Baozhong had already announced the opening of the immortal abode on the 6th day of the 10th month, and he had also emphasized that the immortal abode would be issuing membership cards to serve its esteemed guests. Only members would be allowed to use the private rooms on the 2nd floor, and the private rooms on the 1st floor would allow them to enjoy a higher quality of service. Moreover, on the opening day of the immortal abode, members would be able to enjoy the festivities with the emperor and the various ministers, and they would be able to interact with the people up close. As for the specifics, they could consult the immortal abode. Chapter 98. As soon as the news spread, many people flocked to the immortal abode like a flock of ducks, especially wealthy merchants. They all came to the information desk outside the immortal abode to ask for advice. The person who received them was the immortal abode's external manager, Yang Fu. Using his silver tongue, he managed to sway everyone who came, telling them all about the benefits of a membership card. For example, a membership card was a symbol of one's status, allowing them to enjoy a higher level of service and be looked upon with respect. With a membership card, they could enter private rooms or private rooms on the 2nd floor, allowing them to interact with even more important figures. With a membership card, once a friend came here and received it, it would be equivalent to gaining unparalleled face. They would be dazzled, and at the same time, treat you with even more respect. More importantly, the money used to apply for a membership card wasn't given to the immortal abode. Instead, it was deposited here first, saving them the trouble of bringing large amounts of silver with them when they came out to spend. More importantly, with a membership card, they could also enjoy a discount when they spent money. In descending order, there were 4 types of cards: platinum card, gold card, and silver card. These could be bought with money. What couldn't be bought with money was the Supreme card. With this card, spending was completely free. Of course, those who could obtain a Supreme card were also not ordinary people. For example, up until now, the only person who had such a card was the real owner, Yang Chendong. Platinum card, a one-time deposit of 20,000 taels of silver. You could enter any private room on the second floor or private room on the first floor, and enjoy a 20% discount when you spent money. Gold card, a one-time deposit of 5,000 taels of silver. You could enter any private room on the second floor or private room on the first floor, and enjoy a 10% discount when you spent money. Silver card, a one-time deposit of 1,000 taels of silver. You could enter any private room on the first floor, but not the second floor, and enjoy a 5% discount when you spent money. As for non-members, but if they wanted to enter the immortal abode, they could only enter the main hall on the first floor. There were over 100 tables there, enough to accommodate over 1,000 people at once. However, no matter how lively the main hall was, if one didn't have a membership card, even if the private room on the first floor or the private room on the second floor were empty, they still weren't allowed to enter. This was the benefit of the membership system. All membership cards can be used to deduct the funds in the card when spending money. In other words, as long as you had a membership card, you could come to the immortal abode without bringing a single copper coin. After eating and drinking, you could just hand your membership card over to the waiter and register your bill. Just imagine how cool that would be. Of course, the membership card also had a minimum limit. That was, when the amount was less than 1/10 of the original amount, there would be a reminder to remind you that you had to top it up again. Using a silver card as an example, 1/10 of 1,000 taels of silver would be 100 taels of silver. When the balance of the card was less than 100 taels of silver, the service staff would remind you to top up the card, so that you could continue using it. At the same time, you could top up more silver in one go to increase your membership level. For example, if a silver card member were to top up 5,000 taels of silver, he would be promoted to a gold card member. Of course, for those who refused to recharge, once the amount in the card was used up, the card would be cancelled after 3 months. If they wanted to recharge, they would have to apply again. If there was a deficit in the previous card, they would have to make up for it. After Yang Fu explained the situation in detail, many people were tempted, especially those merchants who had money but didn't have high statuses. In the Great Ming Dynasty, a merchant's residence was ranked third. It was one level lower than the common people's residence, which was the so-called good family. People like them had a lot of money, but they didn't have high social status. The goal of many of them was to improve their social status by interacting more with the government. Now that the immortal abode had given them such an opportunity, how could these merchants, who wouldn't wake up early without benefits, not be tempted? Merchants were smart. It was precisely because of this that some people suggested that while the immortal abode's membership system seemed good, why didn't so many high officials and nobles come here to spend money? If only merchants came, then it would lose its original meaning. In response, Yang Fu confidently smiled and replied, "My lord has already sent gold cards to all officials of the third rank and above in the capital. Although it's a membership card that doesn't have a deposit amount, they can enjoy a 20% discount. I'm sure that they will definitely come. Moreover, when the immortal abode opens for business, even the emperor, empress, and officials will appear here. With this kind of influence, how could there be any worry that no officials will come? Here, there's singing and dancing, fine wine and delicacies that can't be seen anywhere else. The environment is the best, and the service is the best. How could there be no customers?" When they heard that even the emperor would come here for the opening, the merchants were instantly filled with confidence. Those who paid to apply for membership cards came one after another. The Ming Dynasty had just gone through the rule of literature, and the country was rich and the people were strong. Many merchants had plenty of money, so applying for a membership card wasn't a big deal. Those with money directly applied for platinum cards, while those with less money applied for gold cards. There were even some who applied for silver cards as a test. They wanted to see if the immortal abode was as good as Yang Fu said. and then consider adding more money to apply for a better membership card. In just 7 days, the first batch of members was tallied up. There were more than 40 people with platinum cards, and the value of the cards was more than 800,000 taels. There were more than 200 people with gold cards, and the value of the cards was more than 1 million taels. There were more than 400 people with silver cards, and the value of the cards was more than 400,000 taels. In just 7 days, more than 2 million taels had been raised. When news of this money-making speed spread, the entire capital was thrown into an uproar. It had to be known that the Ming Dynasty had a very low tax rate, which was lower than the current 10% tax rate. In addition, the Ming Dynasty's taxes didn't count as business taxes. In theory, business taxes went to the emperor's private funds, but because there was no strict policy, the emperor could only rely on eunuchs to collect them. As a result, it was very unstable. For example, the Wanli emperor's private funds were even richer than the national treasury. The Chongzhen emperor was as poor as a dog. As a result, the entire Ming dynasty's annual tax revenue was only 4 to 5 million taels. But before the immortal abode had even opened for business, it had already collected nearly half of that. How could anyone not be shocked? In the imperial palace, Wang Zhen was grinning from ear to ear after receiving the report from the Eastern Depot. He had originally been worried that the immortal abode wouldn't be able to bring him enough profit, but now, it seemed that he didn't need to worry at all. Wang Zhen immediately ordered the Eastern Depot and the embroidered uniform guard not to disturb the immortal abode in the future. On the contrary, they were to increase the patrols in the area. And if anyone was found to be causing trouble, they were to be immediately arrested. As a result, the immortal abode's business rose to another level. No one dared to mess around here, and no one dared to eat for free. With such a good environment, it would only attract more and more people. After several days of preparation, the day of the opening finally arrived. It was currently autumn in the capital, and the weather was cool and refreshing, neither hot nor cold. On the morning of the 6th day of the 10th lunar month, the area where Zhengyang Gate and Great Ming Gate intersected was bustling with activity. The current emperor, Zhu Qizhen, had already been informed of this matter. Thus, after the morning court session, the emperor, who had always wanted to have fun, led a group of civil and military officials from the imperial city to the outer city, their target the immortal abode. Unlike the emperor's usual excursions, Zhu Qizhen had brought Empress Qianshi with him. This was something that Yang Qindong had specially invited. In his own words, this was called the emperor's family enjoying the pleasures of the common people. Wang Zhen was naturally in full agreement with this. With the binding of benefits, the greater the immortal abode's reputation, the more benefits he would receive in the future. In the Empress Palace, Qianshi was rather excited. This was one of the rare occasions where she would accompany the emperor on an excursion. For this reason, she, who had never been good at dressing up, rummaged through her chests and drawers to find quite a few gold and silver ornaments. She had the palace maids help her try them on one by one, and in the end, she chose a dignified outfit. She wore a jade crown with dragon and phoenix pearls, a red robe with large sleeves, a red veil, a red silk skirt, and a red bead. Her hair was tied into a bun with dragon and phoenix ornaments, and the robe was embroidered with golden dragon and phoenix patterns. Such a dignified outfit was almost comparable to the one worn by the empress. Only then did Qianshi walk out of the imperial palace satisfied. She boarded the dragon carriage and went with Zhu Qizhen to the immortal abode. When the emperor went on an excursion, his safety naturally had to be taken into consideration. Along the way, the embroidered uniform guards and foreigners from the Eastern Palace had long since filled the streets. Several thousand people had been mobilized, and their silhouettes filled the streets outside the immortal abode. Yang Qindong, who had already arrived at the immortal abode, didn't raise any objections. Although the appearance of the foreigners had prevented many commoners from approaching the immortal abode, this wasn't a place for commoners to spend their time. Besides, even though it was said to be enjoying the festivities with the commoners, there were too many commoners here, so there was no way to take care of their safety. If something were to happen, the reputation of the immortal abode would be completely ruined. Since the commoners couldn't get close, the area in front of the immortal abode was much more spacious. A red carpet over 100 meters long had already been laid out here. It was extremely eye-catching from a distance. This was the arrangement Yang Chendong had made to welcome the emperor. As they walked the red carpet all the way to the immortal abode, they basked in the attention of tens of thousands of people. The spectators had been changed from officials to commoners. By the time the emperor's dragon carriage arrived at the end of the red carpet, Yang Chendong was already waiting there in his green robes. In the entire court, it seemed that Yang Chendong was the only one who didn't wear his official robes and only wore his green robes. Everyone else was afraid that others wouldn't know his identity. Only this young master didn't care about what others thought of him. He continued to act according to his own wishes. This subject kneels to welcome your majesty, your majesty, your majesty. May your majesty live for 10,000 years. Please descend from the carriage and walk, Yang Chendong said in a booming voice as he knelt on the red carpet. Chapter 99. If it was any other time, this would be considered as blocking the emperor's way. But today, no matter if it was the palace guards or the ministers, no one tried to stop it. It was as if everything was perfectly justified. Hee, it's Minister Yang. Since that's the case, Empress, let's get off the carriage together and see what tricks he's up to. Ingzong Zhu Qizhen seemed to be in a good mood. As he laughed, he helped Empress Qian onto the dragon carriage and walked onto the red carpet. Long live the emperor! Just as they stood firmly on the ground, shouts sounded from all around them. A group of commoners who came to watch the show instinctively knelt on the ground the moment they saw the emperor's face. In addition, there were many people that Yang Chendong had arranged to guide the crowd. Instantly, shouts of "Long live the emperor" rang out from all directions. The momentum was so great that it was much louder than the voices of the ministers in the imperial court. At first, Ingzong was shocked. He instinctively thought that there was some kind of danger and wanted to turn around and run. However, when he saw that it was the crowd cheering for him, he laughed and then raised his hand generously to the crowd. Everyone, please rise. Thank you for your majesty. The crowd of commoners who came to watch the show climbed up from the ground and looked at Zhu Qizhen excitedly. Their expressions were filled with admiration and admiration. But more than that, it was envy. Zhu Qizhen seemed to enjoy this kind of gaze. He did not move quickly. It felt as if he was taking care of Empress Qian, but in reality, he was enjoying this moment of being the center of attention. Yang Chendong acted as if he did not know about this. He led the way in front and looked left and right from time to time. He used his insight to see if there was any danger in the surroundings. Even though the area was already filled with spies from the Eastern Faction Guards and the embroidered uniform guards, and the Security Bureau had also sent out quite a few people, it was better to be safe than sorry. If something really happened to Ingzong today, even if he didn't flee, he would still revolt. Fortunately, no accidents happened along the way. Even though the people were curious about what the emperor looked like, under the stern gazes of the Eastern Faction Guards, the embroidered uniform guards, and the warden's office of the 5 cities, no one had the courage to break the order and cause trouble. Ingzong held Empress Qian's hand and walked forward step by step. Along the way, he frequently raised his hand to the people around him to show off his might as the Son of Heaven. Just like that, when they were halfway through the journey, shouts suddenly sounded from all directions, completely drowning out the noisy discussions around them. In our great Ming Dynasty, the mountains are the lofty heads. In our great Ming Dynasty, the rivers flow like hot blood. In our great Ming Dynasty, the trees are rooted to the ground. In our great Ming Dynasty, the clouds hold hands. The vast plains are wrapped with jade belts. The fields are woven with colored silk. The winds of the great Ming rise. The mighty winds of the great Ming shake the heavens and roar. As soon as the majestic voice rang out, everyone was startled at first. Then, General Fan Zhong rushed out from the side to protect the emperor. Even Empress Qian turned pale at this moment. On the other hand, Ingzong Zhu Qizhen was surprised at first, but when he understood what everyone was singing, he suddenly burst into laughter. Good. What a mighty and majestic voice. What a good song. Beloved official Yang, is this the new song the people were talking about? Yang Chendong sighed in admiration. As expected of the emperor, His reactions were quick, and his composure was extraordinary. He strode over and said, "Your Majesty, this is the new song this subject composed. It's called Our Great Ming Dynasty." "Our Great Ming Dynasty is a good song. Good. You deserve a reward." When Zhu Qizhan heard the 50 male attendants of the immortal abode singing the song together with the crowd, he was extremely happy. He even shouted out a good twice. "Thank you for your reward, Your Majesty." Yang Chendong was also overjoyed. He thanked the emperor on behalf of the 50 attendants. Not bad. A song of praise made Zhu Qizhan very happy. His footsteps seemed to be much lighter as he continued walking. Our Great Ming Dynasty has many beautiful mountains and rivers. Our Great Ming Dynasty is rich in natural resources. Our Great Ming Dynasty's people are the most hardworking. Our Great Ming Dynasty is even more outstanding now. The 4 seas meet guests, the 5 continents make friends, the winds of the Great Ming Dynasty rise, the mighty winds of the Great Ming Dynasty shake the heavens. Along the way, Zhu Qizhan could hear the singing of Our Great Ming Dynasty. He felt as if he was floating in the air. It wasn't just the emperor who felt this way. Even the officials following behind him felt their spirits lifted when they heard this majestic song. Some of the officials who were originally disdainful of the so-called new song began to pay attention to it at this moment. Only now did they realize that if a song was well composed, it might really be able to stir the hearts of people. Our Great Ming Dynasty was sung over and over again. By the 3rd time it was sung, Yingzong and Empress Qian had already arrived in front of the immortal abode's gates. The entire area was covered in red silk, making it look like a sea of red. Your Majesty, this subject will be so bold as to invite the 2 of you to cut the ribbon. In addition, I would like to invite Lord Hu Meng to come forward as well." Yang Chendong knelt on the ground again and begged loudly. "Cut the ribbon? What's the meaning behind that?" Yingzong asked curiously. "Your Majesty, cutting the ribbon means cutting the ribbon. It's an auspicious omen for the opening of a new store," Yang Chendong replied with a smile. "Interesting. Beloved official Yang, please make the arrangements." Yingzong also wanted to see what cutting the ribbon was, so he immediately agreed. Since the emperor had already agreed, the empress naturally nodded with a smile as well. Empress Qian was also a beauty of her generation, and she was also of noble character. Since the 2 of them had agreed, the Minister of Rites, Hu Meng, naturally couldn't refuse either. Dressed in the robes of a standard 2nd-rank official, he strode over to the ribbon-cutting stage in front of the immortal abode. In front of a window on the 2nd floor of the immortal abode, a young girl saw Hu Meng walk onto the stage. She immediately shouted excitedly, young miss, look! Lord Hu Meng is also on stage. He's standing right next to His Majesty." "That's enough, I saw it. Also, little Qing, can you not be so excited here? If someone hears you, they'll say that the women of the Hu clan have no manners." Hu Yanxiang, who was called Miss, pretended to be angry and glared at her maid Xiaoqing. Then she looked at the ribbon-cutting stage with a sweet face. When she saw that there were only the emperor, the empress, her grandfather, and Yang Chendong on the stage, her face was full of joy. Out of so many ministers, only his grandfather was called to the stage. Was this hinting at something? Hu Yan thought she was smart. She thought this was Yang Chendong's intentional arrangement. He wanted to raise her grandfather's prestige, and at the same time, express his special feelings for the Hu clan. This moved her greatly, but also made her regret it. What made her regret was that she only found out about Yang Chendong's assassination a long time later. Hu Zhongning knew his daughter's temperament, so he gave strict orders that no one was to speak of it. It wasn't until later, when Hu Yan went to visit Yang Duo, that she found out. She was so worried she cried. She even pestered her 7th sister to go to the Yang Chendong manor. Only when she saw that Yang Chendong was still as lively as ever did she finally relax. As someone who had been there before, how could Yang Duo not see Hu Yan's feelings for her 7th brother? She immediately smiled and told her 7th brother to give Hu Yan a gift. Her worries weren't in vain. Yang Chendong thought for a moment, then gave the most prestigious card in the immortal abode to Hu Yan. He even invited her to attend the opening ceremony of the immortal abode. With this card, Hu Yan had special privileges. Before the immortal abode was open to the public, she had the right to enter in advance. As a result, she was the first to witness the prosperity of the immortal abode. Today, she even brought her servant little Qing with her to the second floor of the immortal abode. She found the best vantage point to watch the opening ceremony. Hu Yan's heart was filled with sweetness. However, what she didn't know was that Yang Qindong hadn't invited Hu Yan to the stage because of her. Instead, it was because Hu Yan was the oldest among the civil officials. He was already 73 years old. Out of respect for the elderly and love for the young, he invited Hu Yan to the stage. In truth, Yang Qindong had also wanted to invite Duqing, Zhang Fu to the stage. He was already 73 years old, but after considering that he didn't get along with Wang Zhen and the others, he didn't want to cause any more trouble. On the stage, Yingzong, Empress Qian, Hu Yan and Yang Qindong had just taken their places when 4 women in kipeos walked out of the immortal abode's main entrance. They were Yang Duo, Qiao Yin, Lady Shui, and Lady Xiang. The 4 of them were all extremely beautiful. Coupled with their exquisite cheongsams, they attracted everyone's attention as soon as they appeared. The 4 women looked like celestial fairies. Each of them carried a copper tray with a pair of scissors on it. These were the props used for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Wow! They're so beautiful. What are they wearing? How can their figures be so perfect? That's right. If my concubines wore these clothes, wouldn't they be just as beautiful? Faced with this kind of discussion, someone in the crowd quickly responded. These clothes are called kipeos. They're already on sale at the Sky Beyond Trading Company next to the immortal abode. Even if you have finished products, you can also customize them. Is that so? Our great Ming Dynasty also has something like this for sale? That's great. I'll go take a look at the Sky Beyond Trading Company when I get back. After receiving this response, some of the men in the crowd became even more excited. They were already imagining what their wives would look like if they put on these beautiful kipeos. These kinds of discussions and responses could be seen everywhere in the crowd. The people from the security bureau had all become salesmen, working hard for the Sky Beyond Trading Company's future prosperity. At this time, everyone's attention had already shifted from the emperor and empress to Qiao Yin and the other 3 women. The appearance of the 4 women not only attracted the gazes of the spectators. Even Yingzong and Empress Qian, who were standing on the ceremonial stage, looked at the 4 women with great interest. However, their eyes were filled with a kind of admiration. Chapter 100. Cough, we can begin now. He didn't want to draw too much attention to the 4 women. 3 of them were his women, and 1 of them was his older sister. He didn't like being watched and taken advantage of like this, so he urged them to begin. On the second floor of the immortal abode, little Qing was chattering away. Young miss, their clothes are so beautiful. They're just as beautiful as the one you brought back. Hu Yan replied absent-mindedly. However, she was thinking that if she was already Yang Qindong's woman, she would definitely have a seat on the ceremonial stage right now. Under Yang Qindong's urging, the ribbon cutting began. Yingzong and the other 3 each held a pair of scissors and cut the red silk in their hands. The immortal abode's workers, who had been arranged beforehand, removed the red silk covering the 3 words, immortal abode. Not only that, but the originally red immortal abode suddenly changed. The red disappeared without a trace, and was replaced by a bright, transparent, and sturdy-looking glass. It turned out that the red silk wasn't covering the outside of the immortal abode, but rather the inside. When the red curtains were pulled open from the inside, what was revealed was the clear, transparent glass. The current Great Ming Empire only produced colored glass, and the quality wasn't all that great either. The sudden appearance of so many pieces of glass, and so many of them at that, actually covered the entire immortal abode. It was easy to imagine just how shocking this was. Beloved official Yang, what is this? Yingzong pointed at the clear glass with an expression of shock. Replying, Your Majesty, this item is called glass, and it came from overseas. It is transparent, and can be seen from the inside, and can also be seen from the outside. It also has the ability to block wind and rain. When used in a room, it can allow light from the outside to enter the room, making it much brighter. In winter, it can even allow sunlight to enter the room, making it much warmer. Yang Chendong had long since expected this question, so he gave a simple answer. Good stuff. Ingzong couldn't help but sigh after hearing this. It's a good thing, but it's a bit too expensive. Just the glass used to decorate the immortal abode alone cost over 100,000 taels of silver. If the scale of the project is even larger, I'm afraid the cost will only increase. Yang Chendong was afraid that Ingzong would ask for an exorbitant price, and wanted to use glass to decorate the palace. Therefore, he immediately asked the question. Sure enough, after hearing how expensive this thing was, just the immortal abode alone cost over 100,000 taels of silver. If it were to be installed in the entire imperial palace, even tens of millions of taels wouldn't be enough. He couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Then he turned to Hu Ming and said, Minister Hu, go back and supervise the Ministry of Works. See if they can produce such transparent glass. Yes, Your Majesty. Even though he wasn't the Minister of Works, Hu Xiao still felt that the possibility of him creating one was too low. But since the Emperor had spoken, he naturally had to agree first. All right, Your Majesty. Now, please enter the main hall of the immortal abode. There is still a program waiting for Your Majesty's personal evaluation. Yang Chendong didn't want to waste too much time on the matter of glass. He immediately invited the Emperor and Empress inside. Understood. As soon as he heard that there was still a program, Ingzong immediately ignored the matter at hand. With a smile, he walked with the Empress into the immortal abode. While the officials were still curious about the effects of the glass and how it was produced, they saw the Emperor enter the immortal abode. One by one they followed him in. As soon as they entered the main hall, they were greeted by the sight of a glass tower that made them gasp in surprise. Calling it a glass tower wasn't correct. It was more like a champagne tower. There were 5 floors in total, divided into a triangular shape. There were 35 transparent champagne glasses arranged on each floor. At the very top, there was only one glass. The further down one went, the more glasses there were. Beloved Minister Yang, what is this? Ingzong pointed at the transparent and exquisite glass tower with a curious expression. He'd originally thought that as the Emperor, he was already used to seeing all sorts of strange things in the world. However, after coming to the immortal abode today, he finally realized that there was no limit in the universe. Your Majesty, this is called a champagne tower. There are 5 floors in total, and the meaning behind it is that Your Majesty is the supreme ruler of the world. At that time, when the champagne is poured from the top, the drink will flow down from the first cup at the top until all the cups are filled with champagne. Yang Chendong explained in detail, causing Ingzong's eyes to brighten up. His curiosity was also piqued. Beloved Minister Yang, is there any explanation for pouring the champagne you speak of? Is it possible for us to do what we wish to do? Ingzong asked playfully. Naturally. Your Majesty is the supreme ruler of the world, so this matter should naturally be left to you. Servants, bring out the champagne. Yang Chendong laughed heartily as he waved his hand. A female attendant dressed in a black qipao immediately walked over and placed several large champagne bottles in front of the 6th young master. Yang Chendong handed a bottle filled with champagne to Ingzong and said respectfully, Your Majesty, please. Ah. He'd only asked out of curiosity. He hadn't expected Yang Chendong to agree so quickly. Now that he noticed that the officials had already walked into the hall, if he slipped up and spilled the champagne everywhere, wouldn't he become a laughingstock? Ingzong was a bit hesitant, and didn't immediately take the bottle. Yang Chendong seemed to have noticed the Emperor's awkwardness. He smiled and said, This subject is so bold as to ask Your Majesty, Empress, and this subject to do this together. This was equivalent to sharing the risk. If something went wrong, they could push the blame onto Yang Chendong. Ingzong was overjoyed when he heard this. Today is an auspicious day for the immortal abode's grand opening. Everything will naturally be decided by Minister Yang. We will allow it. Thank you, Your Majesty. Yang Chendong had a flattered expression. Then he took 2 more champagne bottles. After the 3 of them took one each, they stood in 3 different directions. Then they raised the bottle and poured the champagne into the first glass on the champagne tower. Empress Qian and Yingzong imitated Yang Qindong's actions. They also raised their champagne bottles and poured the champagne into the tower. Pure champagne immediately flowed out, releasing a fragrant aroma and covering the entire tower like flowing water. The sparkling and translucent champagne flowed like a waterfall, covering every single glass and filling it to the brim. This scene caused the officials to cry out in surprise and cheers. Yang Qindong had already tested this champagne tower countless times to ensure its safety. So, regardless of whether this was the first time it was poured or not, there wouldn't be any problems. At first, Yingzong was very careful when pouring the champagne. However, after discovering that there were no problems, his courage grew, and he poured the champagne much faster. In the end, he was actually the first one to finish. Naturally, Wang Zhen and the others cheered loudly. After Empress Qian and Yang Qindong finished pouring the champagne in their hands, the 25 glasses in the tower were filled to the brim. Then, the sixth young master asked the emperor to take the first glass at the top. Empress Qian took the second glass, and Yang Qindong took the third. The other officials also stepped forward and took the 25 glasses according to their rank. Even so, there were still some officials who didn't get a glass of champagne. However, it was fine. Yang Qindong was already prepared. He waved his hand in the distance, and a row of male and female service staff wearing black waistcoats and black cheongsams walked over. Each of them held a silver platter in their hands, and on the platter was filled with champagne. Soon, everyone had a glass of champagne in their hands. Yang Qindong saw that the time was right, so he raised his glass and said loudly, "For the prosperity of the great Ming Dynasty, I invite everyone to drink this glass. Your Majesty, please. Please everyone, let's drink together." Yingzong was in a good mood. He laughed and raised the champagne in his hand. "Your Majesty, please." The officials also gave him face and drank in unison. Then they poured the champagne in their hands into their mouths. When it entered their mouth, it was sweet and refreshing. The taste was very comfortable, and after drinking it, everyone had a lingering aftertaste. "Not bad, this thing tastes very good." Yingzong had eaten all kinds of delicacies in the world. It was already not easy for him to give such an evaluation after drinking the champagne. Of course, with Yingzong's evaluation, it would be difficult to sell champagne in the future. After the champagne celebration, Yang Qindong personally led the emperor and empress to the second floor of the immortal abode. The other officials of the third rank and above were led there by the service staff. Those of the third rank and below could only stay on the first floor. Fortunately, they weren't receiving outsiders today, so the place was quite spacious. The private rooms could be filled as many people as they wanted. On the second floor, Yang Qindong led Yingzong to a private room with the best view on the left. The room was about 70 to 80 square meters in size, and it even had a private washroom. There was a soft sofa, a wine cabinet, a table, and chairs as well as a bell tied to a string. Yingzong pointed at the bell and asked curiously, "What's this used for?" Replying to Your Majesty, "This is a bell. If there is any need, as long as you pull it gently, there will soon be service personnel outside." Yang Qindong reached out with a smile and pulled it casually. Immediately, a crisp bell sounded. Not long after, a voluptuous female attendant dressed in a black qipao walked in. "How may I help you, esteemed guest?" "Tell Madame Shui to prepare a song and a performance," Yang Qindong said with a smile as he watched the female attendant walk in. "Yes." After answering, the female attendant left, swaying her hips. Yingzong, who was watching from the side, nodded repeatedly. "Not bad, not bad. This is a good idea. Sir, we can also put something like this in our study. It will be much more convenient if we need someone to wait on us." When the production was expanded in the future, the problem of quantity would naturally not be a problem. Presumably, at that price, most people would only be able to taste it. Not many people would be willing to spend so much money to reach a certain level. There were even more types of women in this aspect, and they were mainly divided into 4 categories. Layered drinks, 30 g of seedless melon pulp, 20 g of pineapple jam, 10 g of milk. He squeezed the watermelon juice and poured it into a cup. Add a little water to the pineapple jam and squeeze the juice. Take a clean glass and fill it with ice cubes. When all the ingredients are ready, pour all the ice cubes out of the glass and pour the milk into the glass slowly. It's best not to pour it on the glass wall. Then, use a spoon to slowly pour the watermelon juice into the glass, and finally the pineapple juice into the glass. This way, the layered drinks were completed. The most important thing was that the density was controlled well. Carbonated drinks, or soft drinks as they were commonly known. For example, cola, Sprite, soda water, etc. They were named Coca-Cola, Gianlibo, etc. Fruit and vegetable juices. Based on their characteristics, they could be divided into concentrated fruit juices, syrup juice, freshly squeezed fruit juices, diluted fruit juices, etc. They were named apple juice, orange juice, peach juice, etc. Milk drinks were drinks that contained a certain amount of fat, and were made from it. For example, milk, soy milk, milkshakes, etc. They were named fresh milk, raw milk, sweet milk, walnut milk, and so on. There were already so many variations on the drinks, let alone the food. With the help of MSG, cooking wine, meat powder, and other condiments, the Immortal Abode's food was even better than the palace's. Of course, from time to time, Yang Chendong would also send some MSG over. After all, if one's life was better than the emperor's, then it would be dangerous. Sai, my sixth brother, has always liked to mess around since he was young. Look at all the things he's made. As his big sister, I don't even know what to say. Yang Fei smiled helplessly as she looked at the menu of food and drinks. But if one looked closely, they would be able to see the pride and gratification in her eyes. Of course, as his big sister, she had also thought about Yang Chendong's changes. When he was young, her sixth brother was the most honest of people, the type who only knew how to study every day. But after he grew up, he changed so much that she couldn't recognize him. Fortunately, one was married in the capital, while the other was living in the Yang clan's old residence in Jianing Prefecture. After not seeing each other for so many years, it was normal for people to change. Even though Yang Fei spoke of helplessness, her face was filled with pride. When Empress Qian saw this, she smiled and said, "Yang Shima is a man of good fortune." As soon as he arrived in the capital, he brought the great Ming's auspicious potato. Now he's created this immortal abode. He truly is a man of ability. Even His Majesty praises him from time to time. That's because of His Majesty and Empress Qian's good fortune. How could it be the work of a little brat like him? Yang Fei naturally didn't dare take credit for her sixth brother. The current world was under the rule of the Zhu clan. It was only right for them to be respected. By the way, Madam Wang, Yang Fei is married to Wang Meng. Is Yang Shima married yet? Empress Qian asked casually. Perhaps this was a common problem for women. When they gathered together, they would always gossip about others. I really didn't ask him. But I don't think so. Otherwise, he wouldn't have kept such an important matter from me, his big sister, Yang Fei said with a smile. Her little brother had grown up, and was about to start a family. He was no longer the snot-nosed brat of the past. Not far from the Empress' private room, Yang Duo and Hu Yan had also reserved a room. The two of them had already lost count of how many times they'd rung the bell. There were many empty cups in front of them, and they looked like they wanted to try all of the drinks in the immortal abode today. I can't anymore, big sister Duo, or I can't drink anymore. Hu Yan rubbed her round belly as she sat on the sofa and weakly shook her head. Her eyes were big, but her belly was small. She'd originally thought that she had some strength, but when she really started drinking, she realized that these things were really bloating. Even though there was a bathroom in the private room, she still ended up drinking until she was full. No matter how good the drinks were, she could only sigh. I can't either. Young Duo also shook her head and sat down on the sofa. Then her body half collapsed. These things are too delicious. I don't want to give up on any of them, but I can't finish any of them. I can't continue to waste them like this. Hu Yan couldn't help but laugh when she saw the usually dignified Yang Duo acting like a little girl. Big sister Duo, are you still afraid of wasting things? With such a capable little brother, you don't have to worry at all. That's enough. Are you praising me? Or are you scolding me? I'm basking in your glory today. If you didn't have a supreme card, we wouldn't be wasting things like this. Oh right. Even I, as your big sister, only have a gold card with 5,000 taels of silver in it. How did you get a supreme card that doesn't cost you anything? Yang Duo retorted. At the same time, she stared at Hu Yan, waiting to see how she would respond. Big sister duo air, what are you talking about? Hu Yan's face instantly turned red after being hit on her soft spot. Right at this moment, the sound of music came from the stage on the first floor. Hu Yan used this as an excuse to lean against the transparent window and look down. She could see everything on the stage clearly, so she said, Big sister duo air, the performance is about to start. Let's watch it together. This little girl. Seeing that Hu Yan didn't answer her question, Yang Duo let her off for now. She sat on the indoor swing and watched the performance on the stage. The stage on the first floor was about 400 square meters. It was much bigger than the one in Nine Arts Workshop and 100 Flowers Hall. At this moment, a group of girls in gorgeous dresses walked up the stage. They were all sisters invited by Lady Shui and Lady Xiang to help out. They all had a foundation in dancing. Of course, they also became talents in Yang Chendong's eyes. It wouldn't be long before they became part of the Yang Manor. The girls surrounded Lady Shui, who was wearing a festive red cheongsam, as she walked up the stage. She looked like a red flower set off by the green grass. She was so beautiful at this moment. Wow. She's so beautiful. After seeing Lady Shui's new outfit, the people upstairs and downstairs couldn't help exclaiming. Even in the private room where the emperor was, Zhu Qizhen kept nodding. He asked Wang Zhen, Sir, is it because of this woman that Xixing wants to kill Yang Shima? Yes. Hearing this, Wang Zhen felt cold sweat trickling down his forehead. After that incident, Yang Chendong said that he wouldn't pursue the matter. Wang Zhen locked Xixing up for a while, and then let him out. That night, his right leg was chopped off by Hu Changning, the town supervisor of the embroidered uniform guard, who was in a hurry to save someone. Because he didn't respond in time, when he came out, his legs were unevenly spaced, and he walked with a slight limp, becoming a real slope. This made Xining very unhappy. He once told others that if he had the chance, he would teach Yang Chendong a lesson, and make him like this to vent his anger. Chapter 102. Now that His Majesty suddenly asked about this matter, Wang Zhen's heart was startled. Yingzong hadn't asked about this matter since he'd handed it over to him. But who knew if the emperor was paying attention? Even an idiot could tell that the immortal abode was going to be a place of great wealth in the future. As a collaborator, he was sure to earn quite a bit. Even if it was for his own sake, he had to ensure Yang Chendong's safety. From the looks of it, he needed to remind Xining not to go overboard. Otherwise, it wouldn't look good on everyone. When Yingzong heard Wang Zhen's ambiguous answer, he smiled and said, This girl is so beautiful. It must be said that this Yang Shima has profited from a disaster. It's not wrong for him to suffer a blade for this matter. Yes, your Majesty is right. One who survives a great disaster is bound to have good fortune in the future. Wang Zhen nodded and bowed in agreement. On the stage below, the dancers took their positions and made their preparations. All sorts of joyous music rang out. After a joyous prelude that no one had ever heard before, Madame Shui finally opened her mouth and sang loudly. Hi! Happy gongs and drums bring out the annual festivities. Beautiful dances bring out the jubilation of the solitary sky plains. The sun paints today red, and the flowers of life are our smiles. Today is a good day. Anything you wish for can come true. Tomorrow is a good day. When we open our doors, we welcome the spring breeze. The song was cheerful and bright. The theme was clear, and the meaning was clear. As soon as the song was played, everyone who heard it couldn't help but nod their heads. Choosing such a new song as the opening dance was just perfect. Coupled with the dance of those dancers, it gave people a visual impact and enjoyment. It was indeed the most appropriate scene. Madame Shui was also extremely excited. Wasn't this a performance for the emperor and all the other officials? Back when she was in 100 Flowers Hall, these people couldn't come because of their status. Even the fragrance of wine was afraid of the depth of the alley. But now, with the immortal abode as a platform, Not only did they not feel the slightest bit embarrassed, they even felt honored. Things were just that miraculous. After the sixth young master took care of it, it was still the same thing, but it had a different ending and influence. Madame Shui was so excited that she tried her best to sing the song. She made the song sound festive, which attracted the applause of the people upstairs and downstairs. Some of the young officials were so happy that they even forgot that the emperor was not far away. They kept shouting that they wanted to reward them. It wasn't until one of their colleagues reminded them that they remembered that they were in the immortal abode, not the red light district they frequented. They all broke out in cold sweat, which made them look rather cute. In less than a cup of tea's time, the song ended. Madame Shui bowed to the audience upstairs and downstairs to express her gratitude, and then left the stage. Soon, 2 waiters in black jackets placed a small square table on the grandstand. There was a fan on the table, which was very eye-catching. It was time to prepare for the storytelling. But at that time, people had never seen such a thing. Storytelling was also a product of the late Qing and early Ming dynasties. For a time, no one knew what it was for. They didn't recall seeing anything like this in the repertoire they'd seen before. Just when everyone had not completely recovered from the good days, and did not understand what was going to happen next, Yang Chendong strode onto the stage in a black robe. Yang Chendong's appearance immediately attracted everyone's attention. Everyone couldn't help but wonder, what's going on? Could it be that Yang Shima was going to perform like an actor? Is he really going to disregard his status like this? People's views were the hardest to change. Even after seeing how different the immortal abode was, it was still the same. Yang Chendong was already prepared for this, so he didn't bother to explain himself. He strode onto the stage and stood behind the small table. Then he reached out and grabbed the table. He raised it up high and smashed it down. Bang! The sound of the impact jolted many people out of their reverie. Today the emperor, empress, and hundreds of officials have come to congratulate the immortal abode on its grand opening. In order to express his gratitude, Chendong decided to tell a story. Whether it was right or wrong will depend on the benevolent and the wise. Alright, let's begin. He brought up the emperor, saying that he was only going on stage because Ingzong was here. For a moment, no one could criticize him. As everyone's attention fell on Yang Chendong, wanting to see what kind of trick he was going to play, the table was smashed down again. Dao to 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, scholarly fame, Empress Xia, Empress Shang and Zhou. The 5 hegemons of heroes and hegemons of spring and autumn rise and fall in an instant. A few lines of names in the history of the Qing dynasty, countless barren hills in the northern sea, the fields of the predecessors, the lands of the descendants, are said to be a fierce struggle between dragons and tigers. There was a pause as soon as the word battle was spoken. Yang Fu, who had long since prepared himself, led a group of attendants to applaud and cheer loudly. Good. With someone leading the way, a few of the officials were also shocked by the opening poem. They all began to cheer in unison. Yang Chendong began to speak amidst the cheers. Starting today, we will talk about the 3 kingdoms. The first chapter is called The Great River Flows East. What era was the 3 kingdoms? It was an era of turmoil and suffering, but it was also an era of heroes. We know that ever since Qin Shi Huang annexed the world, a unified country was established in this place. The Qin and Han dynasties were both unified countries. At the end of the Eastern Han dynasty, before the unification of the Western Jin dynasty, there was a special period. This is what we usually call the 3 kingdoms. Cao Cao once wrote a poem about this era. White bones are exposed in the wild, and there are no chickens for 1,000 miles. But at the same time, it was also an era of heroes. Only when the sea was turbulent can the true colors of heroes be revealed. In such an era, many people sacrificed their intelligence for the reunification of the country. For example, the ambitious and bold Cao Cao, the dedicated Zhuge Liang, the elegant and carefree Zhou Yu, the tenacious Liu Bei. As soon as Yang Chendong spoke, the people who did not understand what he was going to do immediately quieted down. They could tell that this was the story that the 6th young master was going to tell. Moreover, he was going to tell it in a way that they had never seen before. But it had to be said that this kind of format was very attractive. In less than a quarter of an hour, Yang Qindong began to immerse himself in the history of the three kingdoms. The entire immortal abode quieted down. Everyone's thoughts seemed to be driven by his mouth. Even some of the women who did not like history listened attentively. On the second floor, in the private room where Hu Yan was, the maid Xiaoqing could not help saying as she looked at the young lady who was staring at Yang Qindong through the glass. Dong Shuai is so impressive. He speaks so well. Even I can understand a lot of things. Don't say anything. Hu Yan suddenly turned around and gestured for Xiaoqing to keep quiet, giving her a fright. After turning around, Hu Yan turned around and stared out the glass again. Her face was filled with admiration, longing, and even pride. This was the man she liked. He would always be the best and most outstanding. In the immortal abode, Hu Yan wasn't the only one. There were also a few of the family members of the officials who had been invited, especially the unmarried girls. They were all staring at Yang Qindong with wide eyes. It had to be said that having a private room in glass was a good thing. They didn't have to worry about others seeing them. Their gazes could become unbridled. To hell with the gentlemanly behavior of a gentleman. Of the many girls present, it was inevitable that some of them would fall in love. Some of them had already decided that when they returned, they would beg their parents to send someone to the Yang clan to propose marriage. There were many times when women were just like men. When they took the initiative, it was quite frightening. Following Yang Qindong's analysis of the history and characters of the three kingdoms from shallow to deep, everyone watched with relish. Some of the officials even had their mouths and eyes wide open. Saliva even flowed out from their chins. After the stunning appearance, Lady Xiang's equally beautiful voice was also brought into full play. By Suzhen at the foot of Mount Qingcheng. I've cultivated my body in the cave for 1,000 years. I've worked hard to achieve the Tao. And I've been reborn into a human being. Wholeheartedly following the Tao without any distracting thoughts. Converting to the three treasures and abandoning the mortal world. I beg the Bodhisattva to enlighten me and save my chastity. Lady Xiang, like Lady Shui, was soon remembered by everyone with the poem, The White Quality at the foot of Mount Qingcheng. In the women's private room on the second floor, Hu Yan looked at Lady Xiang with some envy and murmured in her heart, shameless, shameless. How many women have you had? Should I also hurry up? Suddenly, Hu Yan stood up abruptly and pulled Yang Duo, who was staring at the stage, and said, "Seventh sister? Where is eldest sister? I want to see her." "Eldest sister is in the room next to us," Yang Duo said without looking back. At this time, even if there was an urgent matter, she couldn't delay her from seeing White Lady. On the stage, little Qing, who was played by the maid Chun Tao, also appeared. Then it was Cui Na the former brothel keeper of the Geo Arts workshop, who was dressed as a man. After changing into a man's dress, she looked so delicate and handsome, which immediately attracted the hearts of many young ladies among the officials. Cui Na, who was in her 20s, originally thought that her career on stage was over long ago. She didn't expect that the sixth young master would give her such an opportunity. She naturally cherished it very much. Whether it was her lines or lyrics, she had practiced them many times in private. She had also prepared for today's appearance for a long time. When she saw the fervent gazes all around her, she knew that she had succeeded this time. The three women appeared, and for a moment, everyone was talking to each other. White Lady's dignified beauty, Su Xian's honest kindness, and little Qing's lively cuteness were all perfectly displayed by the three of them. They became the classics of the day. When everyone's eyes fell on the stage, Hu Yan walked out of the private room and went to the room next door, where Empress Qian and the eldest sister of the Yang clan, Yang Fei, were. Good performances were endless, good food was endless, and good wine was endless. During the performance of White Lady's legend, lunch was sent to the various private rooms. The sight and taste were both enjoyable, and it made many people feel that the immortal abode was truly worthy of being called a place where immortals resided. After White Lady's legend, new songs were played one after another. They looked around like country bumpkins entering a city. Soon after, fine wine and delicacies were served, along with new songs. These people's pockets were emptied, and they all sighed. Silver really was a good thing. The Immortal Abode's grand opening had cost them a lot of silver to entertain the emperor and officials in the morning and afternoon. But by night, they had made a killing. Only when the clock struck and the curfew was about to begin did they reluctantly leave. But at the same time, they agreed to come back early the next morning to drink tea, chat, and watch programs. This was truly one of life's greatest pleasures. Yang Chendong's group left the Immortal Abode and headed for the Yang clan manor 15 li south of the capital. The sixth young master sat in the same carriage as Qiao Yin. After a busy day, Lady Xiang and Lady Shui were both exhausted. They naturally stayed the night in the Immortal Abode, allowing Qiao Yin to be alone with the sixth young master. Her face was filled with happiness and joy. "Young master," Su Yozhen sent a message. The carriage suddenly stopped, and Tiger's mane appeared. He placed a bamboo tube in Yang Chendong's hand. Yang Chendong reached out and opened the tube. After taking out the secret letter and reading it, Yang Chendong calmly put it back. He then closed his eyes and thought for a while before saying, "Let him tell the imperial censor of the left, Wang Wenyi. He should know what to do." "Understood," Tiger's mane replied. He turned around and told his deputy, Yang Chendong, about the sixth young master's orders. This deputy director of the security bureau was a private member of the Yang clan that Yang Chendong rarely saw. Wang Wenyi, imperial censor of the left, a third-ranked official of the imperial court. He was different from the other important officials, who spent the day playing, drinking, and having fun. As imperial censors, their job was to supervise the officials. Although it sounded very impressive, there were many things they couldn't do about it. For example, they couldn't participate in something as beneficial as the Immortal Abode's opening ceremony. Since they were supposed to supervise the officials, how could they be part of the same group? There had to be a difference. As a result, those in the position of imperial censor were usually rather poor. Wang Wenyi was standing in such a position. Unlike everyone else, his life was still good. Not to mention other things, he had married as many as 7 concubines. Where did that come from? It was all given to him by his father-in-law. Father Wang was a general term used by some spineless people in the imperial court, and eunuch Wang Zhen, who had absolute power. Chapter 104. Since he was called father, he naturally had to submit to someone else. It was precisely because he had submitted to Wang Zhen that he was able to obtain a high position, ride a fine horse, and even have a large group of wives and concubines. He had been given the position of imperial censor of the left in order to control the imperial censorate and prevent anyone from suddenly harming Wang Zhen. Even though he couldn't openly commit corruption like the other officials, he still had money to spend. After court, Wang Wenyi had nothing to do at home, so he was full of energy. It was now dark, and he was currently admiring the flowers in the courtyard with a concubine he had recently married. His personal attendant suddenly came to report that Su Yozhen, Su Qinghui, had arrived. "Please." A late-night visit was obviously an important matter. Wang Wenyi waved his hand and had a maid take the concubine away, before heading to the central room. Su Yozhen was pacing back and forth in the room like an ant on a hot pan. When he heard the sound of footsteps and turned around to see Wang Wenyi, he immediately cupped his fist and bowed. "Lord Wang, I have no choice but to disturb you so late at night. Did something happen?" Wang Wenyi acted as if nothing had happened, but he was inwardly on guard. "Lord Wang, it's like this. Sun Qing, Dong Kund, Lin Xiangfeng and Yin Meng, as well as Sichuan Imperial Censor Xinyu, have come to find this lowly official. They want me to join them in impeaching Crown Prince Yang Chendong tomorrow morning. This lowly official does not know what to do. I have come to invite Lord Wang over," Su Yozhen said with a humble expression as he observed Wang Wenyi's expression. "Impeach Yang Chendong? What's the reason?" Wang Wenyi became much more serious when he heard about Yang Chendong. As Wang Zhen's trusted aide, how could he not know that the sixth young master of the Yang clan was currently doing business with him? If something really happened, it would be detrimental to his father. It said that Yang Shima sent Immortal Abode membership cards worth several thousand taels of silver to the families of third rank and above officials in the capital, Su Yozhen said seriously. Last time, after being bribed by Yang Chendong, they put on a double act and had the opportunity to publicly impeach the sixth young master in the imperial court. Sure enough, according to the previous plan, the matter was left unsettled. From then on, not only did he receive a large sum of money from Yang Chendong, but he was also promoted by one rank. At the same time, he became an upright official in the eyes of many people. Even the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War, Yu Qian, who looked up to Wen Tianxiang as a role model, had publicly praised him more than once, saying that there should be more Su Yozhen in the court to ensure that the governance of the officials was clean. For this reason, when Sun Qing, Dong Kund, and the others were preparing to impeach Yang Chendong, they naturally found Su Yozhen. This was how Yang Chendong found out the news immediately and pointed the problem to Wang Wenyi. Is there such a thing? If that's the case, we'll just do what we need to do. Wang Wen was startled when he heard such a reason. If it was true, then with this reason he could really make things difficult for Yang Chendong. However, what he couldn't understand was why Su Yozhen would reveal this matter to him in advance. The two of them didn't have any interactions before. Unable to understand Su Yozhen's intentions, Wang Wenyi simply pretended to be ignorant and acted as if he was doing official business. Seeing Wang Wenyi acting as if he was doing official business, Su Yozhen cursed in his heart for being a B*TCH, and still wanting to pretend to be chaste. However, his mouth didn't stop as he said, Lord Wang, to be honest, this official has respected eunuch Wang for a long time. If there is any opportunity to be of service to eunuch Wang, this official will not hesitate to die 1,000 times. Hehe, I know. How about this? If I don't pass on the news to you, then do what you should do. These words allowed Wang Wenyi to understand Su Yozhen's intentions. It seemed that this person also wanted to get on Wang Zhen's good side. No wonder he still came to pass on the news at such a late hour. Although he understood Su Yozhen's intentions, Wang Wenyi's power was limited, and he didn't dare to make a decision for Wang Zhen. Thus, he used this method to reply to tell Su Yozhen that he was aware of her attitude towards Father Wang. However, whether or not he would accept her still depended on eunuch Wang's opinion. Su Yozhen was a shrewd person, and naturally understood the meaning behind the words. Immediately, her face lit up with joy. Then I will have to trouble Lord Wang. As she spoke, she whispered. This official placed a box in front of Lord Wang's backyard. Inside it is a token of my appreciation. Su Yozhen nodded without batting an eyelid, indicating that she understood. Immediately, she left the main room with satisfaction. Then Wang Wenyi called for the housekeeper and asked him to bring in the box in the backyard. Not long after, he saw the neatly arranged 2,000 taels of silver in the box. These taels of silver were enough to cover several years of his salary. Wang Wenyi's face lit up with joy. Come, change this official's robes. I want to see Father Wang. The capital had long been under a curfew, but for a third-rank official like Wang Wenyi, it was still extremely convenient for him to move around. This was especially so when he was eunuch Wang Zhen's subordinate. This was already a public matter, so naturally, no one dared to block his sedan. However, he didn't know that in the darkness, there was a pair of eyes watching his every move. It wasn't until he entered the palace that the owner of that pair of eyes left quietly. In the morning court session, as Zhu Qizhen sat on the dragon throne, all of the military affairs of the country came crashing down on him like a surging wave. Fortunately, the matters discussed in the morning court session today were all good matters. For example, Deng Maoqi's rebellion in Fujian was basically over. Deng Maoqi was killed in the chaotic battle, and his henchmen were either killed, captured, or escaped. It would be difficult for them to cause any more trouble. Minister of War Kuang Yi had just finished speaking when Minister of Revenue Wang's was said that the potatoes had fully matured. The next step was to distribute the seeds. If the emperor did not have any special requests, then he would have a good talk with Yang Shima about the seed distribution. We don't have any other requests. We just want the potatoes to mature as quickly as possible. Also, we have to prevent the potato seeds from flowing out. Teacher, for this matter, have the East faction guards and the ironclad guard keep a close eye on it. Ingzong recalled the warnings that the officials had given him and added on. This official obeys. This old servant obeys. Wang Zhua and Wang Zhen both agreed. Ingzong nodded and said, What other matters do you have? Bring them all up. This official has a memorial. Following a shout, Sun Qing, Dong Kund, Su Yozhen, and the other 4 imperial censors all knelt on the ground. When an imperial censor stepped out, nothing good ever happened. The officials all frowned slightly when they saw this. Even Ingzong was a bit displeased. These imperial censors were always the type to wish for the world to be in chaos. Whenever they had something to report, it would always cause him to be displeased. However, this was still their duty, so no one could criticize them. For this reason, he could only do his best to remain calm and ask, Dear officials, what matters do you have to report? Your Majesty, this official is impeaching the Crown Prince, Yang Qindong. Before the immortal abode opened for business, he gave membership cards to the families of all the officials of the 3rd rank and above in the capital. The amount of money involved is extremely high, reaching several 100,000 taels. Imperial censor Sun Qing reported loudly as he knelt on the ground. Your Majesty, Yang Qindong is clearly trying to bribe the people. Your Majesty, please punish him. Imperial censor Dong Kund said. Your Majesty, this is a sign of forming a clique for personal gain. This official requests that Your Majesty immediately issue an order to arrest this guilty official, Yang Qindong, and issue an imperial edict to investigate this matter. Imperial censor Lin Xiangfeng said as he kowtowed on the ground. Your Majesty. The other imperial censors also began to criticize Yang Qindong. From their words, it was as if this crown prince was already an unpardonable criminal. Looking at the imperial censors kneeling on the ground one by one, Ingzong felt a headache coming on. He really couldn't understand. He was just a minor class 5 official. He didn't have any authority and didn't have any position. How could he be so disliked by others? Bribing the people's hearts? Forming a clique for personal gain? Was this really a rebellion? Ingzong didn't understand, but the other officials were furious. On the surface, they were criticizing Yang Qindong for bribery, but they were the ones who had taken the bribes. This was basically a net that had brought down a whole bunch of people. As a result, the faces of all the officials of the 3rd rank and above in the imperial court turned ashen. Those with bad tempers could no longer suppress their anger. They began to criticize. When did Yang Qindong give us money? He only gave us a membership card out of politeness. There was no money in that card. That's right. There was only a card, but no money. How could it be called bribery? The officials began to refute the imperial censors. Ingzong couldn't help but chuckle as he watched from his throne. It was rare for me to see an imperial censor infuriating the officials. Usually, when something like this happened, there would only be a few officials who were involved in it who would refute it. But today, when more than half of the officials opposed it, it was very rare. Ingzong viewed everything that was happening in front of him as a show. However, there were some people who didn't think that way. What they were thinking about was why there were people looking for trouble with Yang Qindong today after the immortal abode had opened for business yesterday. Who had they offended this time? If they hadn't offended anyone, why were there so many imperial censors standing out at the same time? It was obvious that someone had colluded with them beforehand. Otherwise, how could there be such a commotion? The imperial court was divided into 3 groups. One group was composed of the imperial censors who were criticizing Yang Qindong. The other group was composed of the officials who had been implicated. The last group was composed of officials whose ranks weren't high enough and weren't involved. They watched everything unfold in front of them, as if they were watching a show. The officials retaliated and the censors rebutted, saying that they were only speaking on behalf of Yang Qindong because they had received benefits. Truly, everyone had their reasons. Until one person walked out from the class seat. Everyone's eyes fell on him at the same time. Chapter 105. Your Majesty, please allow this subject to report. As soon as this person appeared, he didn't even look at the imperial censors. Instead, he directly knelt on the ground and spoke to the emperor. Beloved official Yu has presented a memorial. Zhu Qizhen nodded as he looked at this left assistant minister of the Ministry of War Yu Qian, who was rumored to live a very poor life. He wanted to hear what he had to say. This person was precisely Yu Qian. Perhaps it was because of his incorruptibility that the imperial censors had a hard time finding fault with him. Now that he'd taken the initiative to speak up, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. Ignoring the gazes of his colleagues, Yu Qian spoke in a heavy voice. Reporting to your majesty, this subject was fortunate enough to visit the immortal abode yesterday and witnessed its luxuriousness. At the same time, this subject also received a membership card for the immortal abode. Furthermore, this subject took the initiative to check it out, and found that it was only a card with no silver inside. These words came from Yu Qian's mouth, and with his character, if he said he'd checked it out, then he must have. No one had any objections to this. Seeing that no one refuted him, Yu Qian continued. This subject later found out that with this card, one can enjoy a discount when spending money in the immortal abode. Presumably, this is the only use of this card. As soon as he said this, Imperial Censor Sun Qing immediately chimed in. That's right, this is the use of this card. If someone uses this card to spend money, they can save quite a bit of silver in one go. In the long run, won't the total amount reach tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of silver? This is clearly Yang Qindong. Before Sun Qing could finish speaking, Yu Qian cut in. Your Majesty, this subject believes that this matter cannot be settled like this. This subject has already said that this is only a card, and that it can only be used if one spends money. As for someone like this subject, my monthly salary is barely enough to support my family. Where would I find the money to spend in a place as luxurious as the immortal abode? As such, this card's existence is no different from a piece of scrap paper, completely meaningless. This subject believes that your Majesty can ignore the words of the imperial censors and encourage the development of the immortal residence. A place like this that can enrich the entertainment of the common people should be encouraged by the country. Only when there are more immortals like this, the country's tax revenue will be more abundant. In the long run, the treasury will be full, which is a good thing for the country and the people. Yu Qian changed his usual self and took the initiative to speak up for Yang Qindong. At first, everyone was a little puzzled. Could it be that this person also received some benefits from Yang Shima? Otherwise, why would he put in so much effort, not hesitating to directly insult the imperial censors? However, it wasn't until the last few sentences that everyone came to their senses. It seemed like this person's intentions were in vain. He had set his sights on the tax revenue after the immortal abode flourished. Originally, when Ingzong heard Yu Qian's words, he was also suspicious. Could it be that this civil official who called himself Wen Tianxiang really wanted to go with the flow and clear his name like the other officials? However, when he heard Yu Qian's words, he finally understood. He nodded and said, Beloved Yu's words are reasonable. As the saying goes, only when the country is strong can the people live and work in peace and contentment. Teacher, I'll have to trouble you to investigate the immortal abode's income. Afterwards, the tax rate will be 30-1. During Ren Xian's reign, the Great Ming Dynasty was prosperous, and the treasury was full. However, after more than 10 years, Ingzong's hands had already begun to show signs of decline. For this reason, Zhu Qizhen had always been searching for a way to fill the treasury. Thus, the business tax became his goal. After seeing the prosperity of the immortal abode yesterday, Ingzong returned to the palace and immediately came up with the idea of collecting the business tax. For no other reason than the fact that as the emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty, he couldn't even replace all the windows in the palace with glass. This made him feel a strong sense of defeat. In fact, Ingzong still had something he didn't say out loud. As the emperor of a country, he actually wasn't as capable as an official who was younger than him. Yang Qindong could cover the immortal abode with glass, but as the emperor of a country he couldn't. Didn't this mean that he wasn't even as good as an official? This was what he found hard to accept. Today, Yu Qian just so happened to mention that he wanted to collect the business tax from the immortal abode. How could Ingzong be polite? He agreed in person and sent his most trusted teacher, Wang Zhen, to carry out this task. In Zhu Qizhen's heart, Wang Zhen was one of his own. If he was sent to carry out this task, he definitely wouldn't treat him unfairly. Wang Zhen hadn't expected this kind of result. Last night, Wang Wenyi had found him and reported this matter, but he hadn't taken it to heart. Even though he had the power and influence to nip everything in the bud, he hadn't done so. He'd also witnessed the prosperity of the immortal abode, and saw its potential. He was also afraid that Yang Chendong would grow too big, and become a threat to him. That was why he'd wanted to use the imperial censor to warn the sixth young master. Wang Zhen had long thought that this kind of impeachment wouldn't be of much use. It involved all of the third rank and above officials in the capital. Even if he didn't do anything himself, these people alone would be enough to stop the imperial censor's mouth. What he hadn't expected was that Yu Qian would take the initiative to jump out and say that he wanted to collect the business tax from the immortal abode. This caught him completely off guard. Fortunately, this matter still had to go through his hands. This became a bargaining chip in his negotiations with Yang Chendong. After witnessing the prosperity of the immortal abode, Wang Zhen was no longer satisfied with the 10% they'd agreed on. Yu Qian's sudden interruption caused the imperial censor's impeachment to fail. However, it seemed like there was no victor, because the immortal abode had to pay the tax and pay the price. In the end, the court assembly dispersed. The imperial censors left under the warning gazes of the officials. Not long after, Wang Zhen also left the palace, heading straight for the Yang Manor 15 li south of the city. Before leaving, Su Yozhen had already reported the situation of today's morning court assembly to the Bureau of Security. At that moment, Yang Chendong was in his study, looking at the report Tiger's Mane had sent over regarding today's morning court assembly. Because of Yu Qian's appearance, the outcome of what had originally been a muddled case had actually turned against him. He couldn't help but laugh in anger. This Yu Qian isn't fun at all. He's far from being as cute as that smoking, drinking, and perming guy from the future. Young master, what perming? Xiao Yin, who was serving him from the side, inadvertently overheard this and couldn't help but ask curiously. Haha, it's nothing. The young master was just thinking about some things, and was just talking to himself. Yang Chendong couldn't help but laugh. Soon after, his expression became calm again. Yu Qian was a capable, talented, and upright official. What was even more rare was that this kind of person cared more about the people and not the king. Otherwise, in history, Zhu Qizhen wouldn't have been captured and he wouldn't have loudly said, "We are completely thinking for the country and not for ourselves." Then Zhu Qiyu, the successor patriarch, wouldn't have ascended to the throne. He wasn't blindly loyal and was talented. If this kind of person came to Qiqian City, he would definitely be of great help to the new army and the new city's development. Yang Chendong liked talent. He knew what he needed to do. But as for Yu Qian, although he liked him, he also knew that now wasn't the time to recruit him. Even if he tried to recruit him, it would never work. If he wanted to be used by him, he could only use force. How would he use force? When would he use force? This was what Yang Chendong needed to consider. Forget it. Since you don't want to be an assistant minister, then I'll fulfill your wish. He smiled. He had already thought of a way to solve Yu Qian's problem, and it would be done once and for all. With a rough idea in mind, Yang Chendong began to consider the issue of taxation. When it came to doing business, paying taxes was a matter of course. However, this was not the case in the Ming Dynasty. They didn't collect taxes from officials, eunuchs, or scholars. These three didn't just refer to business taxes, but agricultural taxes as well. This made the rich and powerful even richer. The commoners had to work hard for an entire year, but they couldn't even afford to buy food and clothing. With such a trend, the Ming Dynasty's treasury became poorer and poorer. Yang Chendong understood this principle, which was why he used his status to open the immortal abode. Just by avoiding taxes, he could save a lot of money in a year. But he hadn't expected that Ingzong would suddenly use Yu Qian to make such a move, catching him off guard. He couldn't help but wonder if it was because of his appearance that Ingzong's thoughts had changed. If that was the case, then it wasn't a good thing. Yang Chendong wasn't a god, so he naturally had no way of knowing what kind of psychological changes Ingzong would experience. However, there was one thing he had to take care of, and that was the issue of the immortal abode's taxes. Since the emperor had brought it up in court, it would be quite troublesome to avoid paying. How to reduce the amount of taxes needed to be considered. Fortunately, this matter had been left to Wang Zhen. If it had been left to Yu Qian, it would have been a real headache. However, even Wang Zhen was someone who ate people without spitting out their bones. He had to carefully consider how to deal with him. Outside the Yang clan manor, Wang Zhen had arrived. He had his own carriage, and there wasn't a single member of the embroidered uniform guard or the Eastern faction guards that didn't recognize him. When the carriage approached, a group of people knelt on the ground. Wang Zhen had long since gotten used to this kind of situation. He didn't even get out of the carriage, and directly drove towards the Yang clan manor's inner courtyard. Right now the potato harvest was about to begin. Anyone who entered the Yang clan manor had to be strictly checked. Only someone of Wang Zhen's status could act so unbridled. The carriage continued forward until it reached the Yang clan manor's courtyard. When they didn't see Yang Qindong's figure, the embroidered uniform guard commander Qian Shi, who was also Wang Zhen's nephew, Wang Lin arrogantly said, "What's wrong? You're just washing a horse. Why are you putting on such airs? Could it be that you don't know how to come out and welcome us?" The two servants, Yang Wu and Yang Lu, who were secretly paying attention to the movements in front of the courtyard, had sullen expressions on their faces. Their fists gradually clenched as they reached for their pistols by their waists. It was only a distance of 20 steps. They were confident that they could take the life of the person who shouted with a hook of their fingers. Chapter 106. Ha ha ha, I didn't know that eunuch Wang would grace me with his presence. Forgive me for being late. A boisterous laugh rang out as Yang Qindong strode to the entrance of the courtyard. Haha, my young Xianji is too polite. How could this eunuch not feel embarrassed? Wang Zhen, dressed in the robes of a eunuch, stepped out of the carriage and walked over to Yang Qindong. Yang Qindong's smile was the type that hid a knife in his sleeve, but Wang Zhen's smile was also the type that didn't reach his eyes. In the end, the two of them had only come together temporarily for the sake of mutual benefits. They couldn't even be considered allies, so how could they show their sincerity? Yang Qindong bowed and politely said, "Eunuch Wang, please." "Sixth young master, please." Wang Zhen heartily laughed and led the way forward, pulling Yang Qindong 2 steps behind. It was as if he was saying that this was his residence, not the Yang clan manor. Once the host and guests were seated in the main hall, a very ordinary servant brought 2 cups of tea before bowing and retreating. Whenever Yang Qindong's guests came, Xiaoyin would bring them tea, but Wang Zhen didn't even get to enjoy this treatment. From this, one could see that in the eyes of the 6th young master, this person wasn't even worth an ordinary guest. Wang Zhen naturally didn't know about the Yang clan manor. The Eastern Depot and the embroidered uniform guard had countless spies, and many of the important officials of the capital were under surveillance. However, this didn't include Yang Qindong. Not being qualified was one thing, but this place was already surrounded by spies, so there was no need to keep an eye on them. The tea is not bad. It's much better than the last time. Looks like the 6th young master has earned quite a bit of money, Wang Zhen said with a fake smile after dipping his lips into the tea, as if it was for show. Yang Qindong knew that Wang Zhen was reminding him, so he smiled and said, "You're too kind. This is all thanks to eunuch Wang's good fortune. Of course, eunuch Wang has a share of the immortal abode's income." AI. Wang Zhen let out a long sigh, as if depressed. He glanced at Yang Qindong out of the corner of his eye, then fell silent. His expression seemed to be saying, "Hurry up and ask me why I'm sighing." How could Yang Qindong not know what Wang Zhen meant when he pretended to be depressed? Since he was going to put on an act, of course he had to go all the way. He immediately went along with the other party's wishes and asked curiously, "Why is eunuch sighing?" After a moment's silence, Wang Zhen finally spoke, Eunuch Wang, yesterday's Wang Zhen's. You didn't know that there were people. Because you teat yours. 8. Teat know that. T's eunuch. Of such teat, is. Which bastard can't bear to see others doing well, and came up with such a despicable idea. I curse him to die a horrible death. Yang Chendong flew into a rage. His usual gentlemanly demeanor was nowhere to be found. He stood up from his chair and began cursing. She scolded Wang Zhen to the point that he frowned. He thought to himself, where does this look like someone who is well read? This is clearly one of those unreasonable shrews. Wang Zhen listened to Yang Chendong's cursing for a good while. Then, as if he was tired, he sat back down in his chair, panting. Eunuch Wang, tell me who did it. I'll buy his life with silver. His words were spoken in an imposing manner. In reality, Yang Chendong was indeed very rich. He'd earned over 2 million taels of silver from the Immortal Abode's membership cards alone. And that wasn't even counting the people who'd be applying for membership cards soon. There were a few people who'd been waiting to see if the Immortal Abode was as good as they'd been described. After yesterday's events, these people probably wouldn't hesitate any longer. Wouldn't the money still roll in? With money, Yang Chendong's words naturally became much more confident. Now that he'd dared to say that he'd buy his life with money, it made sense. At the very least, it suited his current mood. Seeing Yang Chendong so angry that he'd even go so far as to say that he'd buy his life with money, Wang Zhen couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Youngsters are youngsters after all. They can't keep their cool. One had to understand that these words were already quite a bit of leverage. Even if Wang Zhen used these words to arrest Yang Chendong, the other officials wouldn't be able to say anything. However, Yang Chendong still had a use for him, so he might as well keep his life for now. Since he was a fat sheep, the fatter it was, the more meat he'd get when slaughtered. AI. Wang Zhen let out another long sigh. His tone was earnest and earnest, as if he were an elder lecturing a junior. Sixth young master, you shouldn't be so impulsive. Not everything can be solved with silver. All right, you don't need to worry. This duke has already taken care of the matters in the morning court. Taken care of. Yang Chendong pretended to be extremely shocked. At first he was dumbfounded. Then, as if he'd understood something, he laughed heartily. That's right. How could I have forgotten about father-in-law? With father-in-law's abilities, wouldn't resolving such a small matter be a piece of cake? When Wang Zhen saw that Yang Chendong was about to start flattering him, he was worried that he'd continue to nag for a long time. He hurriedly waved his hands and said, the matter of your impeachment has been resolved. However, the current emperor has also issued an imperial edict that the Immortal Abode must pay taxes. He's even delegated this task to this duke. Sixth young master, what do you think we should do? Yang Chendong, who just calmed down, immediately jumped to his feet when he heard the words taxes. Taxes? Why? The other officials don't have to pay taxes. Even those who haven't yet become officials don't have to pay taxes. This young master is still a fifth-rank official, isn't he? Why should I pay taxes? I'm not paying. Yang Chendong's face was completely that of a scoundrel. When Wang Zhen saw all of this, his evaluation of Yang Chendong in his heart became even lower. Wasn't this person supposed to do great things? How did this Immortal Abode manage to come up with so many tricks? Wang Zhen felt a bit of disdain in his heart, but he didn't let it show on his face. On the contrary, he put on a look of concern for Yang Chendong. This is an imperial edict from His Majesty. Why don't you pay some taxes first? Do I really have to pay them? When he heard the words His Majesty, Yang Chendong seemed to calm down a lot. However, he leaned forward and said in a quiet voice, Father-in-law, you also have shares in the Immortal Abode. If you have to pay taxes, then you'll have to share in father-in-law's profits as well. I only have 10%. It's nothing much. Even if I have to split it, I probably won't get much. Wang Zhen acted as if he didn't care at all. He really didn't seem to care, but Yang Chendong knew that after so many years of monopolizing power, Wang Zhen had long since developed a habit of doing everything he wanted. When it came to splitting his wealth, he probably wouldn't even ask for a single copper coin less. Similarly, once money entered his pocket, he probably wouldn't be willing to part with it if he couldn't take it out. The only reason he said this was because he wanted to fish for more benefits. Knowing the other party's temperament was the same as knowing his trump card. Yang Chendong sighed and said, fine. Since this is His Majesty's wish, then this subject will pay. However, this way, father-in-law's monthly income will be much less. He had originally been immensely pleased with himself, waiting to see what kind of price Yang Chendong would pay to refuse to pay the taxes. However, he didn't expect that Yang Chendong would actually cower and agree. What was the meaning of this? This script was completely different from what he had imagined. At this moment, it was Wang Zhen who was put in a difficult position. If he really had to pay the taxes, he would naturally have to share his benefits. Just as Yang Chendong thought, for a person with such great power, he would always be the one to receive benefits. How could he possibly push the benefits away? No, you can pay the taxes, but you can't give me a share. Of course, I will take a little bit less as a token of appreciation. Wang Zhen's reaction was extremely fast. In just a few breaths of time, he had thought of a countermeasure and expressed his thoughts. Ah! Yang Chendong pretended to be shocked as he looked at Wang Zhen. Soon after he stuttered. Eunuch means that your share won't change? Then how will it be calculated? This tax will definitely be deducted from the general account. No matter, I'll split my share first. The rest will be taxed according to the ratio. Wang Zhen's eyes narrowed as he spoke with a smile, as if he was talking about something insignificant. Yang Chendong cursed Wang Zhen's greed inwardly. He put on a troubled expression and replied, "But if we do that, it will affect the operations of the sky beyond heaven. I won't hide it from father-in-law. Originally, I was planning to use the Immortal Abode's income to purchase goods for the Sky Beyond Heaven Trading Company. You also know that glass and mirrors are all very expensive. Without sufficient funds, it's impossible to do anything. And if we succeed, we'll earn mountains of gold and silver. At that time, I was even prepared to give father-in-law 40% of the profits. Sigh, I'm afraid that once we pay the taxes, we won't have enough funds." He shook his head bitterly as he slammed his palms on the table, as if he really had missed out on something good. Wait a moment. Wang Zhen originally had a cold expression, waiting for Yang Chendong to take the initiative to give him some benefits. However, when he heard that 40% of the profits would be given, his expression immediately changed. He could no longer maintain his previous calm. "Sixth young master, what did you just say? 40%? That's right. 40%. Yang Chendong nodded with an expression that said it was indeed so. Then he added, "Of course, this is under the condition that there is a large amount of available funds. For example, if Eunuch Wang can lend me 2 million taels of silver, in addition to the fact that I don't have to worry about taxes, it is reasonable to take out 40% of the benefits. Unfortunately, since even His Majesty has issued a decree, I'm afraid that it will be very difficult to fulfill." An extremely regretful expression appeared on his face, as if all the beautiful things had vanished into thin air. Chapter 107. No, didn't this Duke say it already? His Majesty left everything in my hands, so this Duke is naturally the one making the decisions. Everything can be discussed. Enough benefits were enough to drive someone crazy. Wang Zhen finally couldn't remain calm under the temptation of 40% of benefits. His expression was no longer as aloof as before. Instead, it was one of deep concern. "I just don't know how much this 40% will bring me in a month. Oh, if we really get 2 million taels of silver, then after a year, the Immortal Abode and Sky Beyond Heaven's monthly profits should be 40% should be around 100,000 taels, right?" Yang Chendong muttered to himself as he counted on his fingers. Then he gave Wang Zhen an extremely accurate number. Wang Zhen's left eye twitched when he heard that he could get 100,000 taels of silver in a month. This number was already more than what he could get from all the other businesses combined. Didn't that mean that as long as he had Yang Chendong's support, he would have an endless supply of money to spend? He could do as many things as he wanted. Of course, Wang Zhen also knew that there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. If he wanted to achieve this, he would have to pay a great price. At the very least, he would have to fork out 2 million taels of silver right now. The question was, did Wang Zhen have it? The answer was obvious. Of course he did. After all these years of plundering and poking around, he had already accumulated quite a bit of savings. Even though he was still a bit short of 2 million taels of silver, with his charisma, he would be able to quickly make up for it. Then should he give it to Yang Chendong? Or should he trust him? Wang Zhen was deep in thought as he considered the feasibility of this step. Yang Chendong looked like he was regretting something with his head lowered, but in reality, he had been watching this arrogant fellow from the corner of his eye. When he saw that he seemed to be thinking about something, he decided to add fuel to the fire. He immediately took the initiative to say, "Eunuch, you don't think that 100,000 taels of silver a month is impossible to achieve, right? Let me tell you, we've only seen the immortal abode. Relying on it won't work. However, once heavens beyond opens for business, the benefits will be unimaginable. This is because the things we sell are not even available in the Ming Dynasty. Small items such as soap, toilet paper, diapers, toothbrushes, toothpaste, perfume, various kinds of canned fish, chongsam, and various kinds of women's underwear. Large items such as glass, various kinds of exquisite glass cups, and even the divine mirror in the palace can be bought as long as one is willing to spend money. Think about it. These items are only available to grandmasters. Wouldn't the price be decided by us? I'm afraid that 40% of the monthly profit would be more than 100,000 taels of silver." Wang Zhen had been listening attentively. Most of the things mentioned earlier were things that he had only heard of recently. Once they were circulated in the market, they would undoubtedly be popular goods. When he heard that there was even a godly item for sale, he was completely relieved. He was very optimistic about the future of Sky Beyond Heaven. When Yang Chendong mentioned that 40% of the monthly profit would be more than 100,000 taels of silver, it was Wang Zhen's turn to slap the table and say, "Fine, then 200,000 taels of silver a month it is. This duke can guarantee that no taxes will be collected, and will also inject 2 million taels of silver into Sky Beyond Heaven and the immortal abode. After a year, you will return the 2 million taels of silver to me, and at the same time, give me a monthly profit of 200,000 taels." Wang Zhen's tone was extremely resolute, as if he had made a decision. He was like a gambler. After he finished speaking, his eyes, which were slightly red from excitement, fell on Yang Chendong, as if waiting for his reply. "That's not a problem." Yang Chendong saw that the wolf had fallen into the trap. How could he hesitate in the slightest? Not only did he immediately agree, he even said that he could immediately sign a contract. If he couldn't, then the immortal abode and Sky Beyond Heaven would all belong to Wang Zhen. Seeing Yang Chendong so confident, Wang Zhen was completely relieved. Whether it was the immortal abode or Sky Beyond Heaven, they were both the sixth young master's painstaking efforts. If he dared to bet even that, then he was naturally trustworthy. Ha ha ha, Dong Shuai is indeed a straightforward person. Since that's the case, then you just need to sign the contract and wait for my 2 million taels of silver to enter your account. Wang Zhen was so happy that he even called out Dong Shuai's name. From Yang Shima to the sixth young master to the current Dong Shuai, it was clear that Wang Zhen's impression of Yang Chendong was changing step by step. His impression of him was growing with each passing day. Speaking of which, Wang Zhen was only blindly taking money. Even if something happened to the immortal abode, he would only receive a little less income. It wouldn't hurt him at all. But now, that was no longer the case. If he invested 2 million taels of silver, then he would have to pay a price. Whether it was the immortal abode or Sky Beyond Heaven, they would all become part of his businesses. How could he afford to be careless or sloppy? As for Yang Chendong, Crimson City's development speed was unimaginable. After conquering Flag Mountain in the southwest of Ryukyu Island, there was nothing to worry about. It was only a matter of time before they could fully develop. Add to that the strength of the Navy, and the amount of protection fees they collected every day could be described as 10,000 taels of silver a day. He really didn't lack this 2 million taels of silver, but he still forced Wang Zhen to spend so much money. He just wanted him to face this problem head-on, and put in more effort. Now that Wang Zhen was willing to fork out 2 million taels of silver, it proved that he had invested a lot. He definitely wouldn't allow anything to happen to his businesses. This was what Yang Chendong wanted to see. As for the 200,000 taels of silver a year from now? Haha. Wang Zhen would have to live until then for that to happen. The two of them really hit it off, and the matter was settled just like that. When they drank the tea, it seemed to have become much more fragrant. Seeing that Wang Zhen seemed to be in a good mood, Yang Qindong took the opportunity to raise two questions. The first was about who had caused this morning's incident. If they didn't find the mastermind behind it, there would likely be more of this kind of trouble in the future. They couldn't just passively take a beating, could they? The second question was about Yu Qian. He had proposed that the immortal abode pay taxes. Although this matter had been handed over to Wang Zhen, and there wasn't much of a problem, as long as he lived he would have to keep an eye on them. Wouldn't that mean that they would have to guard against thieves for 1,000 days? Presumably, everyone would be in a lot of pain. Since he had reached an agreement with Yang Qindong, and had even given him a large sum of money, there were some things that Wang Zhen naturally wouldn't hide from him. He had his own thoughts on these two matters, and told the sixth young master about them. I've already investigated the matter. Sun Qing, Dong Kund, and the other censors impeaching you was Shi Sheng's doing behind the scenes. He was the one who leaked the news to the censors. These people have their responsibilities, so of course they would take action now that they have an excuse. Wang Zhen shook his head lightly as he spoke, a look of resentment on his face. Last time, Shi Sheng had slashed Yang Qindong with a blade. Originally, he should have been punished, and it wouldn't have been excessive even if he had been killed. However, it was precisely because of him that the sixth young master didn't pursue the matter. At that time, he had even promised that the two of them wouldn't interfere with each other's business in the future. But now he had already made a move. Wasn't this the same as slapping him, the middleman, in the face? Yang Qindong's expression changed. He had already investigated the ins and outs of the matter last night, and now he had thrown the question to Wang Zhen in order to hide it. Now he acted as if this was the first time he had heard of such a matter, and said angrily, "This Shi Sheng is really too much of a bully." Yang Qindong's anger was within Wang Zhen's expectations, so he wasn't surprised at all. Instead he comforted him. "Dong Shuai, this matter isn't just a slap to your face, it is also a slap to this duke's face. Don't worry, I will give you an explanation for this matter. This guild will arrange and persuade Shi Sheng to leave the capital. What do you think?" "Leave the capital?" Yang Qindong pretended to be puzzled as he asked. "Yes, leave the capital. Shi Sheng's position is that of 1,000 households of the embroidered uniform guard, and he will use this as an excuse to monitor the officials outside the capital. As for when he will return, we'll decide based on his performance, all right?" Wang Zhen said with a smile, as if he was negotiating with Wang Zhen. Leaving the capital was naturally to toss out the problem and not cause trouble for the immortal abode and realm beyond heaven. As for when he would return, that would depend on Yang Qindong's performance. If he performed well and the two sides were satisfied with the cooperation, then he naturally wouldn't return to the capital. But if Yang Qindong wanted to play some tricks, then he would just summon him back, and Wang Zhen would just have to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Wang Zhen thought that he had a shrewd plan, but he didn't know that this was exactly what Yang Qindong was thinking. Shi Sheng was a member of the embroidered uniform guard, and he also had a powerful eunuch brother like Shi Ning. Making a move against him in the capital would naturally cause a great deal of trouble, and Yang Qindong would find it difficult to make a move against him. But things were different outside the capital. The heavens were high and the emperor was far away, so it was perfectly normal for something to happen to anyone. "All right, then let's do as eunuch says." Yang Qindong appeared to be in deep thought as he nodded his head in agreement. "And the second problem? How do you want to deal with Yu Qian? This person is a tough nut to crack. I won't hide it from you, Dong Shuai." This duke had wanted to deal with him before, but he was unmoved by force or persuasion. As an official, he is extremely honest. Moreover, there are many people who are willing to speak up for him. This has given this duke quite a headache. As he spoke, he rubbed his forehead. Wang Zhen truly didn't know what to do with Yu Qian. Yang Qindong had naturally heard about how Wang Zhen had captured Yu Qian and imprisoned him, only to be helplessly released later, from the Bureau of Security. He naturally knew that Wang Zhen wasn't trying to shirk responsibility, but that he truly had no other choice. Thus he nodded, then pretended to have suddenly thought of something. Since Yu Qian can't do anything to him in the capital, why don't we just send him out of the capital like we did with Xisheng? Isn't he the left assistant minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel? Have someone investigate the situation of the various guard stations in the country. This way, what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Chapter 108. Upon hearing Yang Chendong's idea, Wang Zhen's eyes lit up. Not bad, this is a good idea, but he'll still come back in the end. Wang Zhen lightly shook his head when he realized that this wasn't a permanent solution. It's fine. He'll leave one day at a time, and who knows what kind of situation he'll be in when he returns. When that time comes, we'll think of something else. After all, if we make a move against him now, it will implicate too many people and cause too much trouble, Yang Chendong said, appearing to fear Yu Qian very much. These words were precisely what Wang Zhen was worried about. He was also afraid of Yu Qian, or else he would have made a move long ago. Thinking that there was truly no better idea at the moment, and that sending Yu Qian away would be a way to alleviate the situation, Wang Zhen nodded. Okay, let's do as you say. The atmosphere of this second official meeting was much better than the first. When Wang Zhen decided to invest 2 million taels of silver, he had completely stepped onto Yang Chendong's boat. The only difference was that he was the one on the boat, and this was tantamount to placing his life in the other party's hands. It was just that he was completely unaware of it. In the end, Wang Zhen left the Yang clan manor in satisfaction. Not long after, Yu Qian and Xisheng were transferred out of the capital. At the same time, the 2 million taels of silver were sent in batches to the newly opened Heavens Beyond Trading Company. There was already a dazzling array of goods here. There were many goods in Heavens Beyond, and they were constantly being shipped in from Crimson City. But when they were operating, they would always tell the merchants who came to purchase that there was a shortage of goods, so they had no choice but to sell in limited quantities. The purpose of this so-called limited quantity was to trick the eager consumers into buying, or else there would be no more. In other words, there wasn't enough supply, and there would be a mad scramble. In other words, there was a limit to how many goods could be sold each day. For example, glass. Each piece was 6 by 6, and only 1,000 pieces could be sold each day. The price was set by the highest bidder, and the items would be sold to the highest bidder. As for the others, they would have to wait until the next day. There were also glass cups, perfume, toilet paper, and other items. They were limited every day, so there were always a lot of people who needed them. There were very few goods, which made everything a hot commodity. And all of this followed the principle of bidding. The highest bidder wins. There were also divine items like mirrors, which were not only limited in quantity, but would only appear once every 3 days. Because of this, countless merchants fought over them, and there were also many people who tried to establish relations with the Yang family. Things like getting in through the back door happened from time to time. Since ancient times, sellers had always set the standard of being able to sell their goods. In fact, the more they sold, the better it would be. However, those who came to collect their goods would always sell them at a lower price. However, when they reached the Heavens Beyond Heaven, they did the exact opposite. Do you want the goods? Then he would just offer a high price. Do you want more goods? Not only was there no discount on the price, but on the contrary, the price might be even higher. It was not impossible to monopolize the market, but one would need sufficient funds to do so. It must be said that when the Heavens Beyond Heaven played this game, many merchants hated it, but there was nothing they could do. Outside the Heavens Beyond Heaven, there were always the figures of the Eastern Faction Guards and the Brocade Guards. If someone dared to cause trouble, they would immediately be arrested. If they did not pay a large sum of hard-earned money, they would not be able to leave. The merchants did not dare to cause trouble, and could only play according to the rules of the Heavens Beyond Heaven. As a result, a large amount of gold and silver flowed into the hands of Yang Chendong, and his funds became incomparably huge. Now, when he received goods from the Tianjinwei port, the receiver was also responsible for the task of delivering the money. It was really a pleasure. There were also some merchants who, seeing the heavens beyond heaven making so much money, gave birth to other thoughts. They wanted to get their own ships to travel the sea. Although there were some risks, if they succeeded and brought back the foreign goods, they would definitely make a fortune. However, how could they know that the great Ming Dynasty's sea region had already been taken over by Yang Qindong? Those merchant ships that went out to buy goods were often intercepted by Gao Xiong's navy not long after they left the sea. Then they would be captured along with the money. That was truly a profitable business. Just from this, who knew how much Yang Qindong had earned? In truth, the order to seal off the sea region was given by Yang Qindong, but Gao Xiong himself was not the one who carried it out. Gao Xiong had long lost interest in dealing with the unarmed and defenseless Ming Dynasty merchants, and handed these matters to his assistant Yu Guang. He was together with Lung Song, discussing the matter of attacking Deerport. After taking down Qishan, and dealing with the threat at the southwest rear of Qiqian City, the Yang family's new army took over Mount Ali and Mount Yu, taking over a large portion of Taichung. They also suppressed the enemy's forces near Taichung, and Deerport became the first military stronghold facing the front lines. Deerport. It was the biggest port in the entire Little Ryukyu country. The terrain here was great, and the coastline was also really smooth, allowing large numbers of ships to be parked there. Furthermore, its location was close to the Little Ryukyu Ocean region, making it difficult for others to suddenly attack. As such, it became a natural harbor base. As the highest-ranking officer of the new army, Gao Xiong had been drooling over this place, and wanted to take it for himself. If not for the fact that they lacked manpower, he would have had such thoughts long ago. Now that Deng Maoqi and Fu Zhen had been killed, and the uprising army there was suppressed by the Ming army, Lung Song, who was unable to take advantage of the situation, could only bring his men back to Qiqian City. This allowed the military power in the city to be strengthened. Lung Song's gains from the Fu Zhen trip were huge. The 100 Lung vanguard and 500 support troops that he brought won many battles. In the end, no one died, and only 7 were injured. Moreover, their injuries were not serious. They did not have many casualties, and this was naturally due to the hard work and strictness of their training. After a few months of hard work, the results were also gratifying. They brought back more than 150,000 people from the Great Ming Dynasty, and they obtained countless resources such as gunpowder. With the addition of these Han Chinese, the problem of manpower was alleviated to a certain extent. After another serious and strict examination, Yang, Songdeshang, and the other instructors did not dare to go easy on them. Every support soldier that wanted to officially become a member of the Lung Vanguard had to go through both physical and cultural tests. Only when their results were good or above could they become a regular soldier. However, because there were too many people waiting to be selected, the number of people who passed the examination this time was even more than the previous times combined. There were actually more than 600 people who passed the final examination. With so many new Lung Vanguard joining at once, Gao Xiong and Lung Song discussed and expanded the army, forming a total of 12 companies, with 100 people in each company. These people were then divided into 4 battalions, with 2 battalions for the Navy and the Army, making 6 companies. With the expansion of the Lung Vanguard, Gao Xiong and Lung Song's horizons were broadened, and they set their sights on Deer Harbor. They wanted to deal with the problem of Taichung in one go, and deal a heavy blow to the #1 Shang dynasty. Now that they had a target, what came next was all sorts of investigations and infiltrations. According to the teachings of the 6th young master, before every battle, the most mature performance was to understand everything about the enemy. If there was enough time, it was best to know who the enemy's commander was. What kind of personality they had, what kind of fighting style they would use, had to be understood clearly. Only then could they achieve the greatest victory with the smallest price. Yang Qindong's words had always been treated as the truth in the new army. The investigations began, and the battle plan to attack Deer Harbor began to take shape. Xisheng left, and so did Yu Qian. In the capital, Yang Qindong seemed to have calmed down a lot after the departure of the two. All he could see were the guests of the immortal abode, and the merchants of the realm beyond heaven. For the time being, Yang Chendong didn't pay too much attention to these things that he had been preparing for a long time. He knew that as long as everything went according to plan, he would definitely earn enough money and gain enough popularity. Since he didn't need to spend too much effort on these things, what came next was to deal with those people who had caused trouble for him. In the study of the sixth young master of the Yang clan manor, there were 3 pieces of paper. These were 3 sets of information sent over by the Bureau of Security. They were information on the left: Assistant Minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel Yu Qian, 1000 Commander Shi Sheng of the Embroidered Uniform Guard, and Imperial Censor Shin Yu of the Sichuan Dao. What Yang Chendong didn't expect was that not only did Wang Zhen chase Yu Qian and Shi Sheng out of the capital, he even chased Shin Yu of the Sichuan Dao, who had returned to the capital to report on his work. These 2 are talents. If you want to keep them, send them to Crimson City. Tell Gao Xiong and Lung Song to arrange for people to keep an eye on them 24 hours a day. They can go and see everything, but they can't leave or do anything. After handing over the information on Yu Qian and Shin Yu to Tiger's Mane, Yang Chendong's expression hardened. He looked at the information on Shi Sheng on the last piece of paper and said, "As for this person, take care of him on the spot. But do it cleanly, and no one can see any problems. Can you do it?" "Yes," Tiger's Mane excitedly replied. Then he leaned forward and asked, "Young master, can I personally take care of this matter?" "No." Yang Chendong decisively shook his head. "You are this young master's subordinate. Everyone knows that. If you disappear at this time, people will inevitably become suspicious. How about this? Let Dao Zhao's group take care of this matter. Don't they complain every day that they have nothing to do? If this matter fails, then they can just return to Crimson City and become a supporting soldier. If they want to join the Cold Front, they will have to face even more difficult and stringent tests." Seeing how straightforward Yang Chendong was, Tiger's Mane knew that there was no chance for him to take advantage of this matter. He immediately stood at attention and replied, "Young master, please rest assured. This matter will be handled beautifully." Chapter 109. Nanjing's Yangzhou Prefecture. As the capital of the Ming Dynasty and now a subsidiary capital, this place was still bustling with activity. Moreover, the climate was pleasant. So much of the Ming Dynasty's wealth had been gathered here. Yangzhou Prefecture was the most prosperous of all places. Not only were there all sorts of goods, but because the heavens were high and the emperor was far away, the entertainment industry was also very developed. Shi Sheng and his 10 brothers were enjoying themselves here. He had originally wanted to annoy Yang Chendong a little, so he had his brothers send a message to the imperial censors. This had led to the impeachment of Yang Chendong in the imperial court, which had led to the emperor imposing taxes on the immortal abode, allowing him to vent some of his anger. But soon after, he suffered the consequences of his own actions. Because he had acted on his own initiative, he had incurred the wrath of Wang Zhen. He had left the capital this time to avoid the storm. In his big brother's words, he should leave the capital and have some fun. Once he was tired and the capital was calm, he would naturally be called back. Knowing that this was the result of his big brother's compromise with Wang Zhen, Shi Sheng obediently left the capital and came to Yangzhou, a place of pleasant weather and romance. As soon as he entered this place, Shi Sheng had the feeling of a dragon entering the sea. He brought a dozen brothers to eat and drink every day, which was very comfortable. At night, he would find a very famous local flower to sleep. It was really like being a groom every day, living like an immortal. But all of this would come to an end tonight, because Dao Xiao had personally come, and with him were 3 of Lungfeng's brothers. All of them were extremely skilled in firearms. Dao Xiao had taken on 3 missions this time. Kill Shi Sheng, capture Yu Qian, and capture Shin Yu. He had assigned 3 of his brothers to each of the last 2 missions. Yu Qian was just a scholar without the strength to truss a chicken, so sending 3 of his brothers was already giving them face. As for Shi Sheng's mission, he had to do it himself. Although Shi Sheng had injured the 6th young master, which had been part of the plan, the guards had still been dissatisfied. Based on what they had said, if anyone offended the 6th young master, they should just kill them. What was the point of trying to injure themselves to gain the enemy's confidence? However, this was an order personally given by the sixth young master. As soldiers, it was their duty to obey orders, so there was nothing they could say. Now that he had the opportunity, how could he let Xisheng go so easily? After entering Yangzhou, he quickly met up with the person in charge of the security bureau. After finding out where Xisheng was going tonight, and which entertainer he had taken a fancy to, Dao Xiao quickly started making plans. In Dao Xiao's words, since this brat likes women so much, then let him die on a woman's belly. With a general direction in mind, the next step was to make various preparations, as well as various disguises and infiltrations. He had experienced this many times in the past when he entered the Cold Peak trial, so naturally he was extremely familiar with it. Very quickly, one of his subordinates took on the role of a pimp, another was in charge of keeping watch, and another was in charge of receiving and retreating. Naturally, the matter of attacking Xisheng was left to Dao Xiao. He was playing with a bottle of medicine in his hand. These were all aphrodisiacs. After taking them, even if he was facing a Sao, he would not be able to control himself. He wanted to see Xisheng's wonderful performance tonight. The sky was dark. As expected, Xisheng led a group of subordinates into the ambush that Dao Xiao had prepared beforehand. Once he entered, he could not wait to find the room of the star of the place, the lady called Cai Tianxian, and walked in. However, the moment he entered the room, a pimp followed behind him. At this moment, Xisheng was anxiously taking off his clothes, and was about to get on the bed to wait for the lady's arrival. Suddenly, he heard movement behind him, and the footsteps did not belong to a lady. Out of habit, he drew his spring-embroidered saber. "Dear customer, don't be nervous. I'm here to give you medicine. After taking these things, I guarantee that you will be more energetic. A night as a bridegroom only costs 1 tael of silver. It's cheap, right?" The pimp did not show any fear when facing Xisheng, who was holding a saber. Instead, he walked forward to promote the things in his hands. Originally, when he saw that it was a pimp who came in, Xisheng thought that he was too nervous. Especially when he heard that the other party was promoting pills, he did not take the other party seriously. Instead, he waved his hand and said, "Get out of here. This young master's body is very good. I don't need those things." The pimp should have left after he finished speaking. However, he did not expect that the other party would take another step forward. At the same time, he kept saying, "Dear customer, my medicine is really good. If you don't try it, you'll regret it. Get out." Seeing that the pimp was actually getting closer to him, Xisheng was a little angry. The other party had disturbed his elegance. Even if he killed the other party here, it would not be a big deal. It would just be a lowly record. After he killed the other party, he would just have to report it to the local authorities. The spring-embroidered saber was raised high, as if it would fall at any time. However, the pimp standing opposite him was not afraid at all. Instead, he opened his mouth and said, "Dear customer, you are being unreasonable. I brought you something out of kindness. If you don't want it, just don't want it. Why do you have to fight?" The pimp's calmness gave Xisheng a bad feeling. However, he could not figure out what was wrong. While he was hesitating, he suddenly felt a strong wind coming from behind. Instinctively, he wanted to turn around. However, because his attention was on the pimp, he needed time to turn around. Just as he turned around, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his neck. Then he fainted on the ground. Dao Xiao appeared behind Xisheng. Looking at the unconscious man, he shook his head and said, "Such a lack of vigilance. I don't know how you became a Qianhu of the embroidered uniform guard." After saying this, Dao Xiao angrily said to the man who acted as the pimp, "Cheng Gang, how did you act? You did not show the slightest bit of fear. You almost alerted him. Do you know that if he shouted outside, our plan would have failed?" "Yes, Captain, please calm down. I was also angry when I saw Xisheng. How could I have thought of pretending to be afraid?" The subordinate called Cheng Gang hurriedly admitted his mistake. He was afraid that Dao Xiao would continue to scold him on this issue, so he said, "Captain, let's hurry up. That Cai Tianxian has gone to take a bath. I'm afraid she will be back soon." Oh right. Only then did Dao Xiao remember that this place was not safe. It was also not the time to make a conclusion. He nodded and let Qin Gang help the unconscious Xisheng up. Then, Dao Xiao poured all the pills in the bottle into Xisheng's mouth. After Xisheng drank some water, he completely digested the pills. Then he carried Xisheng back to the bed. One of them left through the window while the other left through the door. After a short while, Cai Tianxian, who had just finished her bath, entered the room. When she saw that Xisheng was already on the bed, she couldn't help but reveal a coquettish look on her face. Then, she swayed her hips and walked to the bed. She had just taken off her clothes when Xisheng woke up. The first thing he saw was Cai Tianxian, who looked like a little white rabbit. His eyes turned red and he pounced on her. Then, there was a loud shaking sound from the wooden bed. Xisheng was dead. The next morning, when the subordinates saw that the Qianhu had not come out of the room, they knocked on the door and entered. The first thing they saw was Xisheng lying dead on the bed with his eyes wide open. Cai Tianxian had also died with him. She had been tortured to death. His subordinate hurriedly did a checkup and concluded that Qianhu she had died of natural causes, due to consuming too much aphrodisiac. Immediately, the news was sent to the Xining eunuch in the capital with the express speed of 600 li. At the same time that Xisheng died, the left assistant minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel and imperial censor Xinyu appeared on a ship. That ship was sailing through the sea, and its destination was Crimson City. Isn't this imperial censor Shen? Why are you here? Looking at the boundless ocean around him, then looking at his former colleague, Yu Qian's eyes widened, his face filled with curiosity and confusion. I don't know. This lowly official only took a nap. When I opened my eyes, I was already here. Xinyu shook his head, a confused look on his face. It seems like we've been kidnapped. Yu Qian was smart and immediately understood his situation. At this moment, he saw a man dressed in camouflage clothes standing not far away. He shouted, "Hey, who are you? Why did you kidnap this official and imperial censor Shen? Do you know that we're very poor? We don't have any money, and no one will come to ransom us." Yu Qian truly didn't have any money. This point made him feel much more at ease. He really wanted to say that they had captured the wrong people, and that they were useless. However, no matter how much Yu Qian shouted, the only response he got was the crashing and slapping of the waves. The soldier not far away seemed to have not heard his shouts, and continued to stand there. He would occasionally glance in their direction, preventing them from jumping into the sea. Yu Qian and Xinyu naturally wouldn't seek death. They wouldn't die before they figured out what was going on. But they also sadly discovered that they didn't know where they were. Where was the ship heading? What would the future hold? They only knew that they had left the Great Ming Dynasty and their future was uncertain. The Immortal Abode and Sky Beyond Heaven were still very popular. Every day, people would line up to eat and stock up. This was especially true for the Immortal Abode. It was already the 12th month, and the weather was getting colder and colder. More and more people began to wear cotton robes on the streets. However, no matter how cold it was outside, the Immortal Abode was still as warm as spring all year round. Some of the private rooms even had to open their windows to let in some warm air. All of this was naturally because of the stove. Chapter 110. Yang Chendong had already considered the problem of the capital's climate. When the Immortal Abode was first built, he had hired craftsmen to install a large number of furnaces in the mezzanine. Once the weather turned cold and the coals were ignited, the heat would naturally dissipate. The guests quickly noticed that the Immortal Abode was as warm as spring. After asking around, they learned that it was because of the furnaces. Speaking of which, this sort of invisible heating method was far superior to placing a brazier in one's home. Many people immediately asked if they could pay the craftsmen of the Immortal Abode to install the furnaces in their homes. This was a business that Yang Chendong had originally planned to make money, so the staff very politely agreed. But because there were only a limited number of craftsmen and limited materials, not only was the installation extremely expensive, they also had to wait in line. But for the sake of keeping their homes as warm as spring, many people paid up and waited in line. This matter quickly spread, and the Minister of Works, Shi Pu, paid a visit to the Yang clan manor. The potatoes had been harvested long ago, and the seeds had been distributed. The embroidered uniform guard and Eastern Depot soldiers could no longer be seen outside the Yang clan manor. But even so, no one dared to cause trouble here. This was because all signs indicated that Yang Shima had an extremely good relationship with eunuch Wang Zhen. The two would meet from time to time and converse for several hours at a time. With Wang Zhen as the flag, who would be stupid enough to take the initiative to find trouble with Yang Qindong? Although Sherpu was the Minister of Works, a second-rank official in the imperial court, he was still nothing in front of Wang Zhen. Not only did he not want to offend Wang Zhen, but Minister Shi even got his current position because of Wang Zhen's relationship. Naturally, he had to be extremely polite to Yang Qindong. He couldn't just send an order like he would any other official, so he decided to personally come. Yang Qindong attached great importance to Sherpu's visit. His father, Yang Rong, had once been the Minister of Works, so their relationship was quite close. When Sherpu arrived and entered the main hall of the Yang clan manor, he was greeted by a wave of hot air, but he couldn't see a single brazier burning. He immediately knew that this place had to have been installed with furnaces. He couldn't help but say with envy, "Honorable nephew, your place really is like a paradise of immortals." Ah! Yang Qindong clasped his fist in the direction of the capital, a solemn expression on his face. "Uncle sure praises me too much. This is all thanks to His Majesty's governance, allowing the realm to be at peace and the common people to live and work in peace." "That's right, His Majesty is quite diligent." Sherpu laughed. The current Ming dynasty looked strong and prosperous, but that was just the capital left behind by Ren Xuanji. When it came to Zhu Qizhen, he put eunuchs in important positions. These court officials, these representatives of Confucianism, were no longer as strong as they used to be. However, Sherpu wouldn't tell Yang Qindong these things in depth. After all, he was just a junior and didn't deserve any deeper guidance. Listening to Sherpu's nonchalant words, Yang Qindong chuckled without saying a word. "Uncle Shi, you didn't come here today just to chat with me, right?" "Haha, of course not. Let's not beat around the bush. This time, I'm here for the furnace wall. You see, such a good thing should be shared with everyone." Sherpu chuckled as if he was working for the country. When it came to serious matters, Yang Qindong's expression became awkward. "What's wrong? Does honorable nephew have some difficulty?" Seeing Yang Qindong's hesitant appearance, Sherpu felt that this matter wasn't as simple as he had imagined. "Yes." Yang Qindong finally nodded his head and explained, "I won't hide it from Uncle Shi. When I first made this furnace wall, it was just an idea. Later on, I invested a great deal of manpower and resources to understand the principles. For this matter, eunuch Wang also invested a great deal of money. Now that he has a share of the furnace wall, if I were to give it away for no good reason, I'm afraid that even if I agree, there will be others who won't." By raising Wang Zhen's name, Sherpu was using his influence to suppress others. Looking at Sherpu's appearance, it was clear that he wanted Yang Qindong to contribute the method of constructing the furnace wall for free. This was something that Yang Qindong couldn't accept. In the society of that time, there was no such thing as property rights. This was especially true for craftsmen. No matter how hard they worked or how much they invested, once they made something good, it would be promoted for free. As for the creator, he wouldn't receive any benefits. At most, the higher-ups would praise him verbally, but in terms of material benefits, there was nothing. This was because from everyone's point of view, the things you made should be contributed. Since it was contributed, why should there be any benefits? Under the heavens, all good things should belong to the emperor, and not a method for personal gain. This seemed to allow more people to benefit, but in reality, it was extremely unfair to the creator. He spent money, time, and talent to make something that was easily used by others. His investment and output weren't proportional at all. In the long run, who would waste time to create something? Even if they didn't create something, they would still receive money. This kind of unfair treatment caused everyone to gradually lose their creativity. Now Sherpu was asking for this craftsmanship, as if he was an ordinary craftsman. Since he was born and lived in the Great Ming Dynasty, then the things he made should also belong to the great Ming Dynasty. Therefore, he should give it all to her. He was against this kind of working method in his heart, but he couldn't say it out loud. Why was everyone else like this, but only she was special? Therefore, Yang Chendong could only use Wang Zhen's name to suppress others. A while ago, the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War, Yu Qian, and the Sichuan imperial censor, Xin Yu, suddenly disappeared without a trace. No one knew if they were alive, and no one knew if they were dead. When this matter came out, everyone's suspicions were pointed at Wang Zhen. This was because these two people had all kinds of conflicts with eunuch Wang. Now that they both disappeared, was there anyone else other than Wang Zhen who had this kind of ability? However, there was no evidence, so no one could do anything to Wang Zhen. They could only secretly guard against him. Now that the name was taken out, even Sherpu's expression turned ugly after hearing it. Before he came, he thought that Yang Chendong might not be willing to hand over the craftsmanship, but it didn't matter. He only needed to move him with emotion and reason. After all, he was still a fifth-rank official in the imperial court, so he should have this kind of awareness, right? However, when Wang Zhen's name came out, Sherpu instantly lost his temper. Then other than buying, is there no other way? Sherpu knew that forcing Wang Zhen to hand over the craftsmanship wouldn't work, so he tried to ask. This, logically speaking, is not possible. Yang Chendong shook his head. However, when Sherpu's face turned gloomy, he continued. However, since Uncle Sher has personally come, I still have to give you face. How about this? Your Ministry of Works can provide copper in exchange for me sending someone to make the fireplace. How about it? Nowadays, most of the fireplaces in the market were made of copper and iron, and some of the parts were very delicate. For example, things like the screws were far from what the Ministry of Works could make. If he were to copy them, it was very likely that the quality of the product wouldn't be up to standard, resulting in all sorts of problems. Once a fire broke out, it would be a huge problem. It was precisely because of the uniqueness of this technology that the cost of installation was extremely high, to the point that ordinary officials couldn't accept it. As a result, many officials went to find Sherpu and said that since he was in charge of the Ministry of Works, this matter was within his jurisdiction. How to install the fireplace in everyone's homes should be his responsibility. In the end, these officials just didn't want to spend so much money to enjoy the benefits of the fireplace. Now, Yang Chendong gave a compromise. The technology couldn't be taught, but it could be exchanged with copper. This way, with the large amount of copper in the Ministry of Works warehouse, the problem of installing the fireplace could be solved. It could also be considered as solving Sherpu's urgent problem. Okay, then I'll thank nephew. Knowing that Yang Chendong was giving him face, Sherpu immediately said it, as if he was afraid that the other party would go back on his word. Afterwards, the two of them discussed the amount of copper needed to exchange for a fireplace. During this time, Yang Chendong naturally demanded an exorbitant price. Although Sherpu felt that it was a bit high, he thought about how those things were temporarily useless in the warehouse, so he might as well exchange them for benefits first. If there was a shortage, he could just collect them from all over the country. Thus he agreed. In the end, Sherpu left Yangjiao Manor with a satisfied expression. After he left, when Xiao Yin came to clean up the tea, she asked Yang Chendong with curiosity and confusion. Young master? Since he brought out Wang Zhen's name, why did he agree to exchange copper? This way, won't we earn a lot less money? Haha, Yin also knows how to use her brain to think about problems. Yang Chendong said with a big smile. Young master? Yin has always used her brain. It's just that I'm not as smart as you, so I can't see it. Xiao Yin said somewhat coquettishly. Ever since the relationship between the two of them became real, in front of Yang Chendong, she became more and more like a little girl. Right, young master, you still haven't said why. Why? Yang Chendong looked into the distance and was silent for a while before replying. Even Yin said that I used Wang Zhen's name to scare people. I'm sure the others would think the same, right? This wasn't what the young master wanted to see. This time, he would let the Ministry of Works arrange the exchange of copper for furnace walls. Firstly, it would serve more people, and secondly, it would be a way to express goodwill to them, so that they wouldn't hate the young master like they hated Wang Zhen. Of course, the most important point is that Qiqian City lacks copper. The industry there is developing too quickly, especially the military factories and shipyards. As more and more advanced products are put into production, the shortage will only increase. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.